Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Honorable the keynote speaker Bapak Profesor Dr. Mujibur Rahman from UIN Antasari Banjarmasin. Honorable our plenary speakers Ibu Hulut Alajarma from University of Edinburgh. Honorable Bapak Parit Paharudin Sainong from Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia. Honorable the Vice Rector 1 of UIN Antasari Banjarmasin. Honorable the Vice Rector 2 of UIN Antasari Banjarmasin. And then Honorable the Vice Rector 3 from UIN Antasari Banjarmasin along with the Dean and also the Vice Dean 1 of UIN Antasari Banjarmasin and our distinguished guests in this international seminar. And also I would like to mention our representative from STAI Al-Jami and STAI Al-Kapuas as the representative guest in our international seminar today. Proceeding in our opening ceremony, I would like to invite all the participants to stand up together, listening to the national anthem of Republic of Indonesia, Indonesia Raya. Hadirin dipersilahkan berdiri. Good morning everyone. Hadirin dipersilakan duduk kembali. Terima kasih. On behalf of the organizing committee, I am Raida Spihana as the Master of Ceremony, would like to welcome you on our international seminar entitled Digital Islam and the Making of Future Muslim Societies. I am proud to mention that this seminar is organized from UIN Antasari Banjarmasin, collaborated with Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia, Jakarta. Respectable speakers, participants, ladies and gentlemen, before we come to the main session, allow me to welcome Ustadz Rija Saputra MA to lead us in prayer.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let's pray to Allah, raise our hands and peace, and put our heart in the presence of Allah, hoping that our meeting today will be fruitful and successful. Ala hadiniyah wa ala kulli niyatin salihah. Al-Fatihah. Amin amin ya rabbal alamin, wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin sayyidina wa maulana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي جعل لكل شيء قدرا وجعل لكل قدر أجلا وجعل لكل أجل كتابا اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وأنزله منزلا المقرب عندك يوم القيامة اللهم إنا نسألك بنور وجهك الذي أشرقت به السماوات والأرض وصلح به أمر الدنيا والآخرة أن تجعلنا وأهلنا وأحبتنا في حرزك وحفظك وجوارك وتحت كنافك ورعايتك يا رب العالمين اللهم ألبسنا ثياب الصحة والعافية وارزقنا من وارث الرزق وتقبل أعمالنا بالقبول الحسن يا رب العالمين اللهم اجعل قلوبنا خزائن توحيدك واجعل ألسنتنا مفاتيح تمجيدك وجوارحنا خدم طاعتك فإنه لا عز إلا في ذل لك ولا أمن إلا في الخوف منك ولا راحة إلا في رضا بكسمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم اجعلنا مقبول بكرامك مكفولين بذكرك مشمولين بعفوك ناظرين لوجهك واجعلنا من ورثة جنتك أجمعين لا إله إلا الله العظيم الحليم لا إله إلا الله رب العرش العظيم اللهم يا حي يا قيوم يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا بادع السماوات والأرض يا من تسمع كلامنا وترى مكاننا وتعلم سرنا وجهرنا يا إلهنا ويا مولانا سبحان ذي الجلال والإكرام نسألك باسمك الأعظم الذي إذا دعيت أجاب وإذا سئلت به أعطيت وإذا استرحمت به رحمت نسألك يا الله نظرة إلى وجهك الكريم اللهم ارحم والدينا واغفر لهم وردهم عنا ارحمهم يا ربنا كما كانوا لنا راحمين وتعتف عليهم كما كانوا علينا متعتفين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين ثم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite Ibu Dr. Nida Mupidah, MPD, to present a brief report on behalf of the steering committee. Please be invited, Ibu Dr. Nida Mufidah.
Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Honorable Rector of UIN Antasari Banjarmasin, so honorable our Arif Efsa, Islam International Jakarta, Olut Al-Ajman, University of Edinburgh, and honorable all Vice Rector, Dean, Vice Dean, all of our lecturers today, participants today, and then also guests from some representative of university in South Kalimantan and Central Kalimantan, mainly from ULM, from UNISCA, and then also from UNU, Stay Al-Jami, and then also IAI Darussalam, and then also Stay Kapuas. And then also today, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed matter of great honor and pleasure for me to be among you this morning in this opening session of this seminar. good morning to everyone present here, that this is really a good time for us to be here. On behalf of steering committee and organizing committee of this international seminar, I would like to extend to all of you warm greetings and good wishes on this special occasion. I'm extremely grateful for the honor that you have come in this seminar. And then I would like to say thank you very much for Director of UIN Antasari Banjarmasin for supporting all, and then also for Rector of UII Depok Jakarta, for the presenter for Mr. Farid. And then also we have one presenter, Mr. Arya Nakisa, PhD, he will be here. And also Ibu Khalud Al-Ajmar, PhD. We are proud to announce for you all that we are partnering with University Islam International Jakarta to hold this event after we have memorandum of understanding yesterday. And then of course, it is my pleasure to introduce you to you all the speakers and who have come from this seminar. And of course, this seminar would be very important things. We would like to share the knowledge, mainly from the presenters, from our presenters, 3 presenters today, and then also presenters from our UIN Antasari Banjarmasin. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, globally, information and communication technology, ICT, has undoubtedly become the central drive for the evolution of modern society. The Muslim world, like the rest of the world, participates in the evolution. Such changes in lifestyles bring rise a number of ethical issues. Contemporary Muslims have learned how to use IT to obtain Islamic materials. This seminar aims to bring together scholars, researchers, students, and intellectuals to discuss and deliberate presentation on digital Islam and the making of future Muslim societies. The question will appear, what do Muslims learn from the digital age? Well, it will be answered clearly in this discussion with the presenters today. Today's seminar has around 200 enthusiastic students and lecturers from some of our universities, mainly our UIN Antasari Banjarmasin, and then also from the student, also from program Khusus Ulama in University of UIN Antasari Banjarmasin. This event is conducted in 2 days, 26 and 27 of July, 2022, divided into 2 locations. For today, this is in Hotel of Design, and for tomorrow, 27 of July, we would like to show academic atmosphere, which is part also international seminar. Tomorrow will be held in campus UIN Antasari Banjarmasin. There are several terms will be discussed in the seminar, such as teaching methodology for undergraduate in the digital age. Speaker Bapak Farid F. Sonang, PhD. This topic is proposed to lecturers who teach methodology. And the second, the use of digital sources for the study of pilgrimage and other religious rituals. Speaker Ibu Khalud Al-Ajmar, PhD. The participants are invited lecturers and researchers. And the third, sectarian conflicts among Muslims and how social media shape them. Speaker, Mr. Arya Nakisa, PhD, he will be here now, later. Participants are invited students from special program at UIN Antasari Banjarmasin. The second day, Wednesday, July 27, 2022, will be held in UIN Antasari Banjarmasin in our campus. It will be panel presentation. Speakers are selected lecturers and postgraduate students who will present their research for 15 minutes, around 15 minutes, and accept feedback from assigned mentor. And one event which is very interesting to be shown, it will focus on academic life with international scholar with the guest Ibu Khalud Al-Ajmar, PhD. And of course, you can later watch on our YouTube. I'm certainly that every presenter will present the application of design research and educational research. I sincerely hope the through presentation and discussion afterwards all of us can contribute to solving educational problems in our countries, and then, of course, making of good future Muslim societies. Finally, I would like to thank for all support to all the committee members for the organizing committee, this seminar, and then also for ensuring that it proceeds smoothly, to all the steering committee and also all organizing committee. So I thank you once again for the presenters, for your participation. I hope that you enjoy, you stay here in our lovely city of Banjarmasin. And then of course, I do also hope that we can meet again later. I would like also to apologize for any inconvenience that you might experience during this seminar. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite our rector, Professor Dr. Mujibur Rahman, MA, for welcoming remark as a keynote speaker and official opening this event. That's it. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Respectable speakers, participants, ladies and gentlemen, it would be an honor for us to invite the Rector of UIN Antasari Banjarmasin to give a keynote speech and officially open this international seminar. Please be invited Bapak Profesor Dr. Mujibur Rahman.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidina Rasulillah ibn Abdillah wa ala alihi sahbihi wa wala. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahil aliyyil azim, amma ba'd. Honorable speakers and distinguished guests, Dr. Farid Saino, the Indonesian International Islamic University, Mr. Farid Sainong is my friend. He was a student in Leiden University when I was a PhD student there. And also his wife, also my friend, Professor Eva. And honorable speakers, our distinguished guest, Khulud Al-Jarma. She is a Palestinian actually, and now working in the University of Edinburgh. Welcome to Banjarmasin, the city of rivers. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban. Banjarmasin hiya qit'atun minal jannah tajri min tahtihal anhar. Some people say it like that. Honorable Vice Rectors, Deans, Professors, lecturers, students, the invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of our seminar today is very important, namely digital Islam in the making of future Muslim societies. It is actually a very currently topic because now we are living in the digital culture. We can call it in digital culture. The most important feature of this digital culture is that we received and produced abundance of information. I frequently said that we actually experiencing a tsunami of information. It's like a tsunami. We are overwhelmed by the information. So this is something new, because like 50 years ago, most of us cannot read information unless we have an access to newspapers, magazine, printed newspapers. But because of the internet now, everything is in our hand. And so Alvin Toffler, the futurologist in 1980s, he used to say that we are going to have a new cultural style called prosumption. Prosumption means a combination of production and consumption. So we produced information, and at the same time, we also consumed the information. Good or bad? Is it a bliss or a curse? Well, some people said that technology is actually a neutral tool. It depends on the man who uses it, the man behind the gun. Some people said like that. There are two important features: speed and power. So technology has the speed and the power. You use technology, then we can multiply the speed and power to do good things or bad things. Welcome, Mr. Ariksen. But if we look at the technology closely, I think it is not simply something neutral, but it is something inherently has the potentials of being bad or good. So it is, I think, a discussion on the ontological and epistemological issue, but I'm not going to that. And in any case, it is, I think, probably helpful if we talk about our digital culture to look at the negative impacts of this, what we call ICT, information and communication technology. So, and then we try to find the way in which we deal with them. Oh, what should we do with them, especially we as university students or lecturers and professors? There are some discussions about the negative impact of technology, especially the internet and social media. About 10 years ago, Sherry Turkle, a psychologist from the MIT, published an interesting book entitled Alone Together: Why We Expect More from Technology and Less from Each Other. This book for me is very interesting. You know, the title of the book also tells us something: Alone Together. Like, for example, there are 5 people. They sit side by side, but they are busy with their own cellular phones. So they don't talk to each other. Every of them connect to somebody else that is far away. So someone who is physically close to us become far away, and someone who is far away become close to us. So Sherry Turkle said, because of this, some people lost the ability to empathize. We don't have the empathy anymore. The empathy means you can understand the feeling of others' feeling. You can imagine yourself in the position of other. So without the empathy, then we become apathy toward our social environment. Modern sociologists talked about long time ago about alienation. So they said modern people experience alienations because of social differentiation, industrialization that happen in modern society. But actually, modern people try to be not alone in alienated. They create technology. We are always connected to the outside world. But still, as I said before, then we become alone together. So this is the first danger, I think, of the misuse of technology. And the cellular phone can also be addictive. According to a survey in the United States, I've read this survey in the New York Review of Book long time ago. It is said that on average, people turn on your phone cell or cellular phone 221 times a day on average. Like 3 years ago, Mr. Rudiantara, he was the former Minister of Information Technology in Indonesia, wrote in Kompas newspaper, he said that average Indonesians spend about 3 hours and 23 minutes a day just for Facebook. 3 hours and 23 minutes for Facebook. Maybe for the others applications also they spend more. So cellular phones become like an idol. What I mean by idol here is something that we make and then we surrender ourselves to it. Why? A philosopher, an Indonesian philosopher, Franciscus Budi Harniman, just last year, I think, published an interesting book. I click, therefore I am. In this book, he said, cellular phone is not something like table, like this microphone. Cellular phone is the extension of ourselves. So we find ourselves there. Our names, our photos, videos, PIN numbers, our secrets, whatever. So it is the extension of ourselves. And through this technology, we show ourselves to the public voluntarily in order to get recognition from people. So if René Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. Now he said, I click, therefore I am. Or you might say, I touch the screen, therefore I am. Moreover, the tsunami of information also led us to cognitive dissonance and confusion. It is more and more difficult today to select the information that we get, to find the accurate information. Because of the speed, even journalists today, sometimes they don't care about accuracy. They just want to be viral. So then we come to something that is called the post-truth. What is it, post-truth? Post-truth is that we consider something is true simply because it is in line with our subjective expectation. It is not objective. It is something very, very subjective. There is no truth, but simply different version of the truth. It is a kind of relativism. So I think it is interesting to look at the book published 2 or 3 years ago in Indonesian translation, I read it, by Tom Nichols, entitled The Death of Expertise. The experts are not dead, but the belief in or the trust in the expertise of the expert is dead. You may recall what happened during this pandemic COVID-19 period. Even up to now, some people still believe that COVID-19 is not real. It is simply a myth or a conspiracy. This is what happened now. I remember one of the scholars from Hadramaut, Yemen. I think he is a rector of the Al-Ahqaf University. He came to visit our university and gave a lecture. He said, the post-truth is actually what the Quran said, فَمَاذَا بَعْدَ الْحَقِّ إِلَّا الضَّلَالِ. Something after the truth is something that will you go astray. Now, something that is valuable is not based on our moral standards or intellectual standards. Something is valuable simply because it is viral. The more the viral means, so many people like it, share it, and comment on it. The more you viral something on the internet, the more happy you are and the more money you get. I remember one of the perennialists, Rini Guénon, wrote an interesting book to criticize modern civilization. So the title is The Reign of Quantity, the Spirit of the Time. Now we are in the reign of quantity in terms of our activities and interaction through the social media. Now, how about religion that we are going to talk about today? Psychologically, I think the variety of religious information that we encounter in the social media or on the internet may lead to confusion and cognitive dissonance. Think about a teenager. He wants to find religious guidance on the internet. What will he or she find? He will or she will find a variety of religious information and sources, from the liberal to radical or even to atheism, available on the internet. So in that situation, someone may fall into two kind of extreme positions. The first one, he becomes a relativist. Second one, he can become an absolutist. Relativism is positive in terms of tolerance, but it is also dangerous if it lead to nihilism. What I mean by nihilism is that you don't know the purpose of your life and you don't know what to do in this life, actually. You lost the meaning of your life. On the other hand, if someone becomes absolutist, it is positive if he wants something to be relied on. Something absolute is very strong. But on the other hand, it is very dangerous too. If you are an absolutist, you may become arrogant or even a terrorist because you think that you are like God as the absolute. So this situation, I think, we can see today in our society or in the world at large. In addition, the virtual public sphere on the internet also lead to the fragmentation of religious authority. It is like a free market. I remember a statement by Peter Berger, which is very interesting. It is a long time ago. I think he talked about secularization in this regard, but it is also applicable to our situation right now. He said, in the free market situation, religion is like a commodity offered to customers that cannot be forced to buy. So it is a free market. So there is a contest between different religious authorities. There's a contest between different religious discourses that cannot be avoided. And sometimes it leads to conflicts and violence in reality. Finally, I believe that all religions encourage your adherents, your followers to contemplate, to think of reality, to be alone with the alone, to be silent sometimes. But now, with the cellular phone, we are always connected. There is a survey for students in the university. The question is, what is the first thing you do after you wake up in the morning? Most of them said they open or turn on the cellular phone. Yeah. So we are always connected. And then we forget to think about our inner dimension of life, the batin, the spiritual dimension of our life, which is very, very important for us, for religious people. I think it is very important. Now I move on to the second issue. What should we do with this as university students, lecturers, professors? I think at least we have to do three things. The first one is that we have to develop a literacy of the digital technology. What I mean by literacy here is that we understand the uses and abuses, the advantages and disadvantages of digital technology. We should talk about this. We should invite experts on this to talk about this, so we know. And then we can take more advantages and avoid disadvantages of the digital technology. And secondly, we should develop research on the digital technology as a technology or its impact on our social, cultural, and political life. I think what we are doing today is this one. Yeah? We are going to discuss the findings, the research findings of scholars about the uses or abuses of digital technology in the Muslim world, within the Muslim culture. Philosopher of science said that science at least can function in 3 levels. The first, science or knowledge can explain the reality. So with the explanation of science about reality, we understand that reality. Second, science also can predict what will happen in the future. So we are talking about the making of the future Muslim society. We predict what will happen tomorrow, 10 years up to now, and so on. But it is not fortune teller. It is not nujum. Yeah? It is scientific. And the third one, science can also help us to control in a limited also situation, but we can control the reality, or we can manage our society based on the findings of science. And the last one, I propose we in the university also should create contents for social media. We should create videos, photos, articles to be posted and published on the internet. It is useless, to complain about the bad contents on the internet while we are in the university, do nothing. We should create something. We should publish something. So then we contribute to make a more civilized public sphere. I mean, the virtual public sphere in our life. I think these are the points that I can share with you. Maybe not really scientific, but I hope it is something for you to think about. I would like to thank the organizers of the conference, of this seminar. And once again, I would like to thank friends from Indonesian International Islamic University, and especially our guest, Mr. What is your name? Arya Nakisa and Hulud Al-Jarma, and also Farid Sainong. Thank you for visiting us, and tomorrow we may meet in our campus, inshallah. So before closing, let us officially open this seminar by saying Basmalah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, our Rector of Universitas Islam Negeri Antasari Banjarmasin, for the welcoming remarks. Respectable guests, ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our first sessions of ceremony. I would like to say and wish you a very wonderful seminar today. Billahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Kami persilahkan untuk kopi break selama 15 menit. Kami mintakan dengan hormat Wakil Rektor 1, mewakili Steering Committee, Ibu Dr. Nida Mufidah, MPD, untuk mengalungkan syahsa sirangan kepada pembicara kita yang ketiga, Bapak Arya Nakisa, PhD from Washington University in St. Louis. Kepada Bapak Arya Nakisa, kami mintakan untuk mengambil tempat di depan. Terima kasih. Bapak dan Ibu yang terhormat, acara plenary session akan kita mulai dalam waktu 5 menit. Terima kasih. Respectable speakers, ladies and gentlemen, now we come to our main session of this international seminar, the plenary sessions from the three speakers. Please allow me to invite Bapak Farid Paharudin Sainong, PhD, from Universitas Islam International Indonesia, and Ibu Hulut Al-Ajarma, PhD from Edinburgh University. Please welcome to the stage. I also would like to invite Bapak Mujibur Rahman, PhD, as the interpreter of this main session, please. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you Bapak dan Ibu. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good morning. Honorable the plenary speakers and also the participants of this international seminar. First of all, we would like to thank Allah the Almighty because only of His blessing we can be here join this international seminar. And also salawat and salam to our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Dear participants, our main topic today is digital Islam and the making of future Muslim societies. And this topic is really suitable with our situation nowadays, right? Because the Muslim world must be aware with the digital age. And we have already two presenters and three there, Bapak Ariana Kisa. And as the moderator, I would like to mention our today's agenda. The first session is presentation time and each presenter is offered 20 minutes only, Bapak Ibu, for the presentation. And then the second session is question and answer. The question and answer can be asked directly here. You may raise your hand. And then we are going to finish the three presentation in advance. After that, we are going to start the question and answer. And then the third agenda will be closing. Okay. Let's start with our first speaker. He is Bapak Farid Paharudin Sainong from Universitas Islam International Indonesia, Jakarta. And then we are going to have Bapak Ariana Kisa, PhD, after this. And then of course, the beautiful lady here, Ibu Hulut Al-Ajarma from Edinburgh University. Let's open our seminar by saying Basmalah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Before I invite the first speaker, please let me inform you about his short biography. Bapak Farid Paharudin Sainong, PhD, is a permanent lecturer at the Faculty of Islamic Studies, Indonesian Islamic University or IIIU. And then he pursued his PhD in anthropology from the Australian National University and also an MA in Islamic Studies from the University of Manchester, UK. And another MA in Islamology from University Leiden, the Netherlands. He worked as a lecturer and also a researcher at the Binus University International and Victoria University of Wellington, University of Hokkaido, and also the University of New South Wales in Canberra. His interests include, but are not limited to, classical and contemporary Islamic studies, anthropology of Muslim society, de-radicalization studies, media and digital, manuscript, and also text critic. Respectable speakers, ladies and gentlemen, and now he will share the ideas with us dealing with imagining, decoding, criticism, online world, and the shaping of Muslim societies. To Bapak Farid Paharudin, PhD, please, the time is yours.
Okay, my slide is ready there. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hamdan wa syukran lillah, salatu wa salaman daimain mutalazimain ala rasulillah sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much in the beginning for Pak Rector, Professor Mujibur Rahman and Professor Dr. Nida as the Warek here, as the Vice Rector, for inviting me to this international seminar. Well, in the beginning, I would like to convey greetings from Professor Nur Hadi Hassan, the Dean of the Faculty of Islamic Studies, the Indonesian International Islamic University. Sometimes I forgot it. Well, my title today is the Imagining, Decoding Criticism, Online World and the Shaping of Muslim Societies. We are very grateful listening to Pak Rector's remarks in this morning, telling us a lot of information, a number of fresh thoughts regarding the tsunami of information, and which result in the what we already familiar with post-truth era, which means if we are not really careful with the information, we could be entrapped, in particular wrong information, and then we could follow the information without thinking critically. So that's another danger when we talk about post-truth society. Now, as we already understand that our society is already full with the digitalization of everything, religious materials, books, or whatever. And to begin with, I would like to share with you the idea why I personally come to the studies of the digital in Muslim society, with particular stories in my journey as an academic. But before that, my paper, next slide, please. My paper will study how online audience examine and make sense of religious materials and messages. The second one, this paper or this presentation examines how online constituents exercise religious materials from social media. And then this paper also examines how online constituents decode religious materials from different sources. And at the end, we would like to think and find ideas how this tsunami of information will shape some dimension of Muslims' life or Muslim societies. Next slide. So I started the studies on the digitals in Muslim societies in 2016 when I live in Wellington, and I was associated until now. Actually, I've been associated as the they call it as a correspondent researcher at the one study center at the University of Waikato. And at that time, I presented a paper entitled, and this was in 2016, When Religiosity is Everywhere, Islam, Politics, and Social Media in Indonesian Local Election. This paper was prepared to comment and react to the use of social media linked to the development of how Jakartan people, especially in the local election in Jakarta at that time, make use or been misused by social media, and that really moved people in a massive number to come to the street, yeah, joining either the 411 or 212, and we could see how effective is the social media to tell people or to persuade people to move. Yeah. The second one, I presented a paper in La Trobe University a conference with the topic Multimedia Mobility and the Digital Southeast Asia, where I delivered a paper with the title Maintaining Virtual Homes, Social Media and Pesantren Families. Here I examine how families in Southeast Asia, especially in Indonesia, separated by time and distance, especially for those families who have boys or girls studying in Al-Azhar in Cairo, and then keep maintaining their communication virtually. Yeah, it seems that it's going to be another dimension in Muslim life. Yeah. Next slide. The third one, at the Eurasias conference in Oxford, I presented online, so I didn't come to Oxford at that time. I presented a paper on fighting extremism, empowering moderatism, representing moderate ulama on social media. And the idea in this paper is to suggest and propose a moderate ulama voice that has been very small or very little in the arena of social media. So we want to bring forward this moderate ulama, and then give a kind of comparative perspective on whatever Muslim societies would like to understand. And the last one, I published a paper on decoding online Islam just recently in 2020, new religious authorities and social media encounters. In the Eurasias conference, I took the case of Professor Quraish Shihab and Gusmus as the moderate voice of ulama. Here in this article, I took the case of Khalid Basalama, and I will share some part of this paper to you today. Not in terms of promoting his ideas and values in Islamic teachings, but rather to show you how he made use social media to persuade people with his own thought and values or thinkings in Islamic teachings. And let me give you a kind of introduction about encoding and decoding. Next slide, please. Here, I use what Laswell and Hall's theory on in the communication by making use his theory of encoding and decoding. So Harold Laswell, he's actually a political scientist, but already an established scholars to share his thought on the communication of political communication by saying that communication is who says what in which channel with what effect. This means that we would like to know how a message is being sent and how it is articulated, and then what effect should be expected afterwards? One of his theory is reception theory. So by this, Hall argues that effort should be made to discover the production of meaning and experience of the public in terms of their interaction with media content or text. I don't want to burden you with another task, so I will just explain another slide in here as expected by the committee in Bahasa Indonesia, but at least we already meet the requirement as an international seminar by delivering in English in the beginning. Oke. Jadi dalam paper ini saya menggunakan atau meminjam teori resepsinya Hall ya untuk melihat bagaimana sebuah informasi ya sebuah pesan disampaikan, dikelola sedemikian rupa, dan kemudian pesan itu bisa memberikan efek seperti yang diharapkan oleh pemberi pesan. Jadi menyampaikan pesan itu disebut dengan encoding ya, atau menyampaikan, sementara menerima pesan disebut dengan decoding. Ya, jadi menerima pesan berarti memaknai pesan yang disampaikan oleh pemilik pesan. Ya. Jadi ada code di situ, mengirim kode pertama, mengirim kode atau tanda di awal, artinya mengirim pesan, dan kemudian bagaimana pesan itu dimaknai oleh penerima pesan, itu yang disebut dengan decoding. Nah, bagi Hall dan kemudian nanti diperkaya oleh Laswell, akan ada 3 posisi, ya, 3 keadaan di mana para penerima pesan akan bersikap. Ya. Yang pertama disebut dengan dominant hegemonic position, di mana penerima pesan akan ya juga mengeksersis, mencoba memahami, tetapi sepenuhnya setelah itu menerima secara total pesan-pesan tersebut. Ya, ada yang menjelaskan bahwa dominant hegemonic position mengandaikan bahwa penerima pesan tidak berpikir apa-apa lagi. Dia hanya memahami dan kemudian menerima pesan tersebut atau setuju dengan pesan tersebut. Kemudian yang kedua, ada yang disebut dengan negotiated position, di mana para pendengar, penerima pesan itu akan melakukan semacam examination kepada pesan-pesan tersebut, ya, baik itu secara kritis ataupun hanya berkata bahwa ada masalah dengan pesan tersebut. Jadi meragukan kebenarannya dan kemudian melahirkan pilihan di akhir, entah dia akan menerima atau menolak pesan tersebut. Nah, kemudian yang terakhir adalah sikap oposisi, dalam pengertian tidak setuju dengan pesan-pesan yang disampaikan, tentu diawali dengan eksaminasi tertentu dan pada akhirnya melakukan kritik dan akhirnya menolak pesan tersebut, entah karena ketidaksetujuan, entah karena ketidakpahaman, entah karena masalah-masalah ideologis atau apapun alasannya. Nah, dengan mengangkat teori resepsi dari Hall dan Laswell ini, saya ingin kemudian melihat ada sedikit, masih punya sedikit batuk. Di slide berikutnya, apa yang oleh Harvard disebut dengan mediatization, ya, dan selalu dihubungkan dengan secularization. Ya, apa yang bisa kita dapatkan di sini bahwa dalam proses pemediaan atau mediatisasi, khususnya mediatisasi agama misalnya, akan selalu muncul bagian-bagian di mana bagian-bagian itu terkesan terjadi proses sekularisasi. Ya, sekularisasi di sini bukan berarti memisahkan agama dengan kehidupan sehari-hari, memisahkan agama dengan ekonomi, dengan politik atau apapun itu. Tapi sekularisasi yang dimaksud di sini adalah profanisasi, ya, di mana sesuatu yang awalnya mungkin kita anggap suci, ya, sacred, dan kemudian menjadi profan setelah terjadinya mediatisasi ini, karena melalui berbagai diskusi, berbagai pembahasan, ya, kadang-kadang misalnya kita tertipu tentang bagaimana pikiran kita terkait dengan hal-hal yang sakral dan tidak mungkin tersentuh lagi atau tidak mungkin didiskusikan lagi. Tetapi sebenarnya itu adalah hal-hal yang sebenarnya profan dan bisa terjadi kapan dan dimanapun. Nah, kalau kita mengambil satu contoh yang cukup ekstrim misalnya, kita mungkin menganggap bahwasanya pemilihan Abu Bakar sebagai khalifah itu sebagai sesuatu yang given, ya, sesuatu yang seakan-akan seluruh umat Islam sepakat dengan memilih Sayyidina Abu Bakar sebagai khalifah. Tapi kalau kita belajar lebih banyak, belajar sejarah, membaca sejarah lebih panjang tentang itu, ceritanya luar biasa dramatis juga. Sebagaimana kompetisi politik yang terjadi dimanapun. Nah, ini yang kita ingin pahami sebagai sebuah profanisasi yang sebetulnya adalah profan. Tidak sakral seperti yang mungkin kebanyakan kita pahami. Jadi itu yang terjadi. Mediatization itu bisa melahirkan sekularisasi dalam pengertian profanisasi di level masyarakat. Di level organisasi, ya, mediatisasi itu juga akan bisa ya mengikuti sekularisasi tadi, akan muncul semacam sikap, semacam praktek, semacam keyakinan bahwa ya pada dasarnya semua itu profan-profan saja dan kemudian biasa-biasa saja untuk kita lihat. Nah, terlebih lagi di level individual, ya ini menurut Harvard, bahwasanya mediatisasi itu akan memunculkan imajinasi religius yang menjadi lebih pasti, ya, menjadi lebih terpahami secara mutlak oleh masyarakat yang memahaminya. Next slide. Dari perkembangan yang kita lihat, entah melalui proses sekularisasi tadi, atau profanisasi tadi, atau mediatisasi tadi, kita kemudian sebenarnya sedang melihat atau merasakan bahwa agama ini punya ribuan nyawa. Ya. Dulu banyak futurolog yang mengandaikan atau berimajinasi bahwa agama akan hilang suatu saat, ya, khususnya di para futurolog di abad 18-19 masih berpikir bahwa agama akan hilang suatu saat dikikis oleh modernisasi, ya, atau kalau saya boleh bandingkan secara sederhana, dulu kita menganggap kain atau sarung itu tidak akan dipakai lagi atau akan ditinggalkan oleh masyarakat Muslim. Nah, tapi yang terjadi sebaliknya, bisnis sarung justru makin meningkat hari demi hari. Salah satunya karena agama yang semakin hidup. Nah, di sini disebutkan bahwasanya agama dengan segala kekuatan sosial, politik, ekonomi yang melingkupi agama itu, maka kemudian agama itu akan selalu hidup. Ya, entah dia hidup dalam konteks yang positif, dalam pengertian yang sesungguhnya, atau negatif, artinya disalahgunakan. Misalnya agama disalahgunakan dalam provokasi politik misalnya. Nah, yang jelas di situ agama kembali marak, agama kembali hidup. Ya tentu terlepas dari kesetujuan atau ketidaksetujuan kita. Dalam konteks ini juga media itu akan terlihat apa ya? Dulu juga kita menganggap bahwa printip media khususnya akan hilang sama sekali di masa digital ini. Tetapi anggapan itu, imajinasi itu tidak terbukti, ya. Bahkan melalui transformasi yang luar biasa, media menjadi lebih baru, media menjadi lebih remaja, media menjadi lebih penting buat kita. Mungkin saya harus percepat. Termasuk dari bagian untuk melihat bahwa agama ini akan selalu hidup adalah bagaimana agama ini terus dihidupkan dalam konteks apapun, ya. Entah itu makin banyaknya sekolah-sekolah agama, makin banyaknya perguruan tinggi agama, makin banyaknya majelis-majelis taklim. Kita tidak hanya temukan di masyarakat, tapi semua kantor, semua divisi, semua unit bahkan membuka majelis taklimnya masing-masing. Nah, di samping itu agama kemudian menjadi komoditas, ya, buat orang yang entah sengaja atau tidak sengaja menjadikan agama sebagai media atau bahan komoditas untuk mencari untung. Ya, kita boleh setuju atau tidak setuju dengan hal ini. Di samping itu, banyaknya nyawa agama ini juga terlihat bagaimana masyarakat beragama ini terhubung, ya, dari satu tempat dengan tempat lainnya. Kalau Islam misalnya, kalau Islam masyarakat Muslim misalnya oleh Talal Asad disebut salah satunya dapat dipahami dengan cara atau menggunakan discursive tradition, di mana masyarakat Muslim itu disebut Muslim misalnya kalau selalu menghubungkan praktek-praktek kesehariannya dengan sumber-sumber keagamaan, dalam hal ini Al-Quran dan Hadis. Slide berikutnya, tidak hanya dalam Islam, ya, bahkan kalau kita boleh jujur, ya, bagaimana agama diperkenalkan secara online justru diawali oleh agama-agama atau praktek-praktek lainnya. Ya, kita bisa melihat dari tahun 80-an, ya, agama Kristen misalnya atau Katolik dalam dimensi tertentu sudah menjadikan internet atau website sebagai bagian dari kegiatan misionaris mereka. Ya, dan ini misalnya terwujud dalam beberapa gerakan, misalnya net.religion di tahun 90 untuk pertama kali internet digunakan secara masif bagi kalangan agamawan, dan kemudian majalah Time pernah membuat report tentang websites of religions, ya. Jadi luar biasa bagaimana kemudian agama, jadi tidak hanya Islam, kita akan melihat agama-agama itu hidup dengan adanya internet, dengan adanya digitalisasi yang semakin marak belakangan ini. Next slide. Ya, kita Muslim punya bukan masalah, tapi selalu menghubungkan kegiatan kita dengan fikih misalnya, ya. Dan kemudian bagaimana menghubungkan atau merevitalisasi pemahaman fikih kita dengan model-model digital yang berlangsung saat ini. Tetapi dalam agama lain, mereka seakan-akan sudah selesai dengan persoalan ini. Mungkin model fikihnya berbeda karena tidak terkait dengan teks misalnya. Sementara kita Muslim memang selalu membahas tentang itu. Misalnya dari dulu sudah ada pemikiran, apakah kita boleh menjadi makmum dengan imam yang lain di tempat lain melalui jalur televisi misalnya. Ya, kemudian ada pendapat yang menyebutkan harus real time, artinya bersamaan waktunya. Jadi misalnya kalau sama-sama di Jakarta, orang misalnya di Cilandak mau ikut imam yang ada di Istiqlal yang disiarkan secara live misalnya, ada yang mengatakan boleh. Ya, tetapi masih lebih banyak lagi mengatakan tidak boleh karena ada syarat ittisal yang harus kita buktikan, harus kita verifikasi, dan ittisal itu lebih ke ittisal fisik, ya, sambungan fisik, meskipun ada semacam semacam kemudahan bahwa ittisal udara pun pada dasarnya bisa, tapi ittisal melalui lines atau online masih sulit mendapatkan penjelasan yang baik dari para fuqaha. Tapi untuk beberapa agama lain, termasuk India misalnya, sudah melakukan elektronik puja misalnya secara online, satu di suatu tempat, yang lainnya di tempat yang berbeda. Saya akan melompat saja di slide berikutnya. Cukup penting untuk melihat bagaimana akademisi melihat atau mempelajari, meneliti agama ini ketika sudah mengalami mediatisasi sedramatis seperti yang kita lihat sekarang. Ya, kita bisa melihat banyak kajian-kajian di sini. Saya hanya menyebut beberapa saja untuk melihat bagaimana para akademisi sudah mulai juga memperhatikan perubahan-perubahan yang sangat dramatis dalam masyarakat ini. Next slide. Saya mengambil sedikit saja untuk menjelaskan kasus Khalid Basalamah dalam konteks encoding dan decoding tadi. Ya, beberapa alasan buat saya untuk mengambil kasus ini, ya, karena Basalamah dalam beberapa konteks misalnya menjadi ustadz yang paling sering dikutip. Ya, pertama kali saya datang ke New Zealand, tinggal di Wellington, ketemu dengan masyarakat Muslim di sana. Sangat banyak mengutip Khalid Basalamah. Itu menjadi salah satu pemicu ketika saya kemudian menjadikan Basalamah sebagai study case dalam memahami encoding dan decoding ini. Saya juga mencoba melakukan online research mengapa kemudian Basalamah menjadi ustadz yang paling sering dicari di dalam mesin Google, ya. Jadi saya mencoba melakukannya berulang-ulang di waktu-waktu yang berbeda, khususnya di tahun 2016 di komputer-komputer yang berbeda, karena setiap komputer akan punya artificial intelligence tersendiri, mungkin saja melahirkan atau memunculkan nama-nama yang berbeda. Tapi saya coba khususnya di tahun 2016 itu, ya, Khalid Basalamah selalu berada di posisi pertama ketika saya ngetik kata ustadz saja. Selalu berada di posisi pertama. Yang lain adalah bahwa Khalid Basalamah adalah sebuah profil salafi yang cukup unik. Biasanya satu kelompok salafi dengan kelompok salafi lainnya tidak bisa menerima. Ya, tidak bisa mendengar ustadz-ustadz yang berasal dari kelompok salafi yang berbeda. Nah, tetapi Khalid Basalamah dianggap mampu didengarkan oleh berbagai kelompok berbagai kelompok salafi di Indonesia. Kalau saya mengambil kasusnya di Sulawesi Selatan misalnya, beberapa kelompok salafi misalnya berbeda satu sama lainnya dan kemudian bahkan berantem, berkelahi satu sama lainnya, baik di media sosial ataupun di permukaan di dalam misalnya ceramah-ceramah mereka, ya. Tetapi Khalid Basalamah itu bisa menyampaikan ceramahnya di Wahda Islamiyah misalnya, satu kelompok salafi di Sulawesi Selatan, dan kelompok-kelompok salafi lainnya, bahkan di kelompok Jamaah Tabligh. Nah, ini hal yang menarik dari sosok Khalid Basalamah. Dulu ada sebuah listing tentang 12 ustadz salafi yang menurut mereka menjadi pilihan yang baik untuk didengarkan. Yang menarik adalah Khalid Basalamah tidak masuk di dalam 12 list itu. Padahal kalau kita menilai secara sepintas, idenya sama, values-nya sama, menyampaikan pesan-pesan yang sama di media yang sama, di televisi yang sama, khususnya di UFIT TV. Ya. Baru nanti dikeluarkan list 14 ustadz salafi, baru kemudian Khalid Basalamah masuk di situ. Nah, ini yang agak berbeda. Secara offline, Basalamah memiliki schedule yang cukup padat, ya, untuk menyampaikan ceramah-ceramahnya. Next slide. Basalamah memang betul-betul memanfaatkan sosial media untuk ngeboost atau berupaya agar ceramah-ceramahnya itu bisa didengar oleh banyak pihak. Beliau punya tim IT yang sangat baik, ya, yang sangat kuat. Jadi dimanapun beliau menyampaikan ceramah, ya, itu kemudian bisa langsung dengan tim IT-nya bisa streaming, dikelola menjadi buku, dikelola menjadi podcast, dikelola menjadi audio dan sebagainya, dan itu bisa meraih banyak audiens dimanapun di seluruh dunia, ya tentu saja masyarakat Muslim Indonesia yang sudah tinggal di berbagai negara. 3 channel atau 3 portal yang cukup banyak mempromosikan Khalid Basalamah adalah channel YouTube-nya sendiri, ya. Di sini kita bisa lihat di gambar ini adalah kalau kita membuka halaman pertama channel YouTube-nya Khalid Basalamah. Kemudian websitenya, official websitenya www.khalidbasalamah.com, dan kemudian yang menarik adalah salah satunya bukan punya dia tetapi oleh orang lain, yakni ayatkursi.com. Next slide. Di ayatkursi.com itu disebutkan misalnya ya ini untuk memboost, ya, untuk membentuk lagi atau memantapkan, mengestablish otoritas agama atau otoritas keislaman yang dimiliki oleh Basalamah, termasuk menjelaskan bahwa jadi kalau kita biasa menyebutkan 9 facts of something, biasanya kita ingin menunjukkan sisi-sisi negatifnya, tapi ini justru ingin ngebus atau membentuk kembali otoritas keagamaan yang dimiliki oleh Khalid Basalamah. Dia punya bisnis yang bisnis kuliner yang cukup maju. Di YouTube juga kemudian memiliki dan menyebarkan salafi perspektif, tetapi dia tidak ingin disebut sebagai Wahabi. Ya, dia punya alasan tersendiri tentang itu. Disebut salafi masih oke, tapi tidak mau disebut sebagai Wahabi. Beliau memanfaatkan kitab-kitab kuning juga untuk mengajar, jadi Bulughul Maram atau Riyadhus Shalihin di beberapa tempat juga beliau gunakan untuk menunjukkan bahwa beliau punya kapasitas untuk mengajarkan kitab-kitab tersebut. Di bagian di ayatkursi.com juga ini dijelaskan tentang sanadnya, ya, intellectual genealogy yang dimiliki oleh Khalid Basalamah, yang beberapa di antaranya masih sulit dibuktikan untuk sampai kepada Rasulullah SAW. Juga dijelaskan tentang hubungannya dengan Ustadz Reza Basalamah, anak Basalamah, tapi mereka tidak saudara. Kemudian untuk menambah popularitasnya juga selalu dibanding-bandingkan dengan Zaki Naik, ya, Ustadz Zaki Naik. Dan yang tidak kalah pentingnya adalah ada klaim bahwa Khalid Basalamah juga pernah bermimpi bertemu dengan Rasulullah SAW, dan ini yang cukup berbeda. Kalau ulama-ulama Sunni atau tradisionalis biasanya tidak mau mengakui atau tidak mau menceritakan atau bahkan merahasiakan bahwa beliau-beliau itu, guru-guru kita itu, kiai-kiai kita itu bermimpi bertemu dengan Rasulullah SAW. Tetapi Ustadz Khalid dan beberapa ustadz lainnya di Indonesia justru ya kita tidak tahu benar atau salah, tapi justru mempromosikan atau bahkan menjelaskan bahwa pernah bermimpi bertemu Rasulullah, dan itu sekali lagi untuk ngebus otoritas agama yang mereka ingin bentuk. Berikutnya, jadi saya kemudian mewawancarai banyak audiens atau jamaah dari Khalid Basalamah di beberapa negara. Ada yang saya temui langsung, ada yang saya kontak secara online dengan berbagai cara untuk mendapatkan orang-orang atau jamaah yang senang mendengarkan ceramah-ceramah dari Khalid Basalamah. Dan kita menemukan 3 model decoding tadi, ya, dominant, hegemonic, negotiated, dan opposition. Jadi kalau Bapak Ibu bisa membaca paper saya di Alternative Spirituality and Religion Review, Bapak-bapak akan menemukan beberapa pandangan yang mengeksamine pesan-pesan Khalid Basalamah, baik itu diterima secara penuh ataupun dikritisi, ya, ataupun ditolak sama sekali. Ya, termasuk model opposition itu adalah adanya berbagai tempat atau masyarakat yang menolak kedatangan Khalid Basalamah, termasuk beberapa tahun lalu di Banjarmasin juga banyak kelompok masyarakat di sini menolak kehadiran Basalamah, dan itu adalah bagian dari oposisi, model oposisi dalam melakukan decoding dari sebuah pesan. Next slide please. Dari semua misalnya paper yang saya presentasikan atau artikel yang saya tulis terkait dengan mediatisasi ini, dan yang terakhir tadi 2020 mengambil studi kasus tentang Khalid Basalamah, ada beberapa yang poin yang tentu saja ya saya tidak ada masalah untuk dikatakan netral atau tidak netral, objektif atau subjektif, tetapi dalam menyampaikan paper-paper ini selalu saja seorang penulis, termasuk saya tentunya, mengambil posisi tentunya, entah dengan kritis atau dengan tidak langsung, ya, atau dengan tidak langsung terhadap pesan-pesan yang ingin saya sampaikan dalam paper-paper ataupun dalam artikel yang sudah kita publikasikan. Jadi misalnya secara umum saya ingin berkata, misalnya dengan tema-tema yang saya bawakan dengan studi kasus, saya ingin justru mengkampanyekan apa yang sudah layak, sudah umum kita pahami dengan pemahaman moderat, wasatiyah dalam keberagamaan kita. Next slide. Lagi. Jadi dari studi-studi ini saya ingin menunjukkan bahwasannya konten-konten yang kita temukan secara online, ya, itu memang akan banyak berhubungan dengan kehidupan umat Islam. Ya, berubah sedikit atau banyak sangat terkait dengan konten-konten yang tersedia, yang available secara online. Ya tentu saja media-media ini mengakselerasi penyebaran informasi-informasi atau ajaran-ajaran Islam, dan itu sangat efektif. Munculnya sektarianisme itu juga tak terhindarkan karena mediatisasi yang kita lihat selama ini, ya, sangat efektif membuat kita bergerak sedemikian rupa dalam jumlah yang sangat banyak untuk sampai pada pesan yang terprovokasi oleh yang menyampaikan pesan. Betapapun selalu ada kritisisme, ya, selalu ada penyaringan yang dilakukan oleh seseorang yang dengan kapasitasnya juga bisa melakukan banyak kritisisme, bahkan banyak penolakan pada akhirnya. Yang tidak kalah pentingnya adalah bahwa mediatisasi ini membentuk otoritas-otoritas baru dalam masyarakat beragama. Tidak hanya Islam. Persoalan yang sama kita lihat, kita hadapi juga dalam agama-agama yang lain. Jadi khusus untuk Islam, semakin banyak orang-orang yang dalam tanda kutip diakui punya otoritas dalam menyampaikan pesan-pesan agama. Sementara orang-orang yang sudah jelas otoritasnya dalam menyampaikan pesan-pesan agama justru untuk tidak berkata ditinggalkan, tetapi tidak didahulukan dari mereka yang tidak jelas asal-usul keilmuannya. Slide yang terakhir, ya tentu saja selalu ada impact factors yang harus kita perhatikan dalam memahami mediatisasi ini. Jadi Islam yang ajaran-ajaran Islam yang disampaikan secara online itu bisa sekali lagi bisa membentuk nilai, bisa membentuk ajaran-ajaran baru, pemahaman-pemahaman baru dalam ajaran-ajaran agama Islam misalnya. The extension of Muslim publics, semakin tidak jelas yang mana yang disebut dengan public sphere misalnya ketika kita dikuasai oleh sosial media ini, ya. Sesuatu yang kita sampaikan secara private misalnya itu bisa viral sedemikian rupa, dan kemudian orang tidak mau tahu lagi bahwa konteks penyampaian informasi itu sangat spesifik sehingga harus dipahami secara spesifik pula. Ya, sering kali kita mendengar jok-jok pesantren misalnya, jok-jok santri yang seharusnya lebih hidup kalau dipahami oleh santri, tetapi kemudian kalau dibawa ke public sphere, ya, itu akan menjadikan menciptakan hal-hal yang kemudian menghabiskan energi kita untuk kita diskusikan. Kalau misalnya Kiai Agil Sirot menyampaikan bahwa Gus Dur sampai saat ini tidak didatangi oleh malaikat, tidak ditanya man rabbuka dan sebagainya, karena sampai saat ini pengunjung di kuburan beliau tidak pernah habis. Karena itu berdasarkan hadis bahwasanya malaikat itu tidak akan datang untuk bertanya, menginterview sampai semua pengunjung pergi. Ya, tapi itu kan jok-jok pesantren dan hanya santri yang bisa memahami itu. Tetapi ketika sampai ke disampaikan dalam sosial media, kemudian menjadi aneh, ya, kemudian menjadi aneh, muncul cibiran, muncul celaan dan sebagainya, karena tidak memahami konteks penyampaiannya. Kita melihat agama ini dari offline disampaikan secara online atau materi-materinya ditransformasi secara online, tetapi juga pada akhirnya menciptakan kecenderungan-kecenderungan baru yang kita lihat secara offline. Jadi misalnya materi-materi pengajian yang kita dapatkan secara online, kemudian membentuk komunitas-komunitas baru on the ground, di lapangan, dan kemudian berkumpul entah reguler sekali seminggu atau sekali sebulan dan sebagainya. Jadi ada multiplication of impact factors dari mediatisasi ini. Dan yang tidak kalah pentingnya, hanya sekedar untuk menyingkat karena waktunya sudah habis, bahwasanya masyarakat Muslim ini ya akan selalu ya tidak untuk berkata bahwa akan menjadi kelinci percobaan, tetapi akan selalu muncul hal-hal yang memang memerlukan kritisisme agar misalnya agama ini atau masyarakat Muslim ini bisa selalu berdampingan dengan ajaran agama secara baik. Dalam hal ini, fikih kemudian menjadi sangat dinamis, menjadi sangat progresif untuk selalu dikaji, untuk selalu diangkat, untuk selalu didiskusikan kembali agar masyarakat Muslim ini tidak merasa bahwa perkembangan teknologi kemudian mempengaruhi atau membuat mereka tidak menjadi religius lagi dalam kehidupan sehari-harinya. Saya kira itu dulu. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ya, thank you Bapak Farid Paharudin as the first speaker. Utamanya beliau memaparkan mengenai penelitian yang telah dipublish papers dealing with decoding and encoding. Dan izinkan saya menyimpulkan beberapa hal terkait dengan paparan Bapak Farid Paharudin, utamanya tentang encoding by messenger, kemudian decoding by the audience. Dan hal yang awalnya sakral setelah melalui diskusi panjang lama-lama menjadi profound, nah, begitu ya Bapak. Kemudian bahwa agama itu memiliki ribuan nyawa dan he also explain about the case study Ustadz Khalid Basalamah. Ya, dan alasan-alasan beliau mengapa tertarik untuk mengkaji figur individu dari Ustadz ini. Oke, sekarang kita let's come to the second speaker. Bapak Arya Nakisa, PhD. Ini yang paling tinggi di antara kita di sini ya Bapak Ibu. Ya, beliau adalah Assistant Professor of Islamic Studies and Anthropology at Washington University in St. Louis. And then he holds a joint PhD in Anthropology and Middle Eastern Studies from Harvard, and then a JD from Harvard Law School, and also an MA in Islamic Law from the International Islamic University in Malaysia. And he has conducted extensive ethnographic fieldwork in the Middle East and also in Southeast Asia using the Arabic and Indonesian languages. Nah, ini menariknya Bapak Ibu karena Bapak Arya ini juga terbiasa berbicara bahasa Indonesia. Jadi jangan khawatir, hari ini kita akan mendengarkan Bapak Arya berbicara bahasa Indonesia terkait dengan data science and also the future of Islamic studies. To Bapak Arya Nakisa, PhD, please, the time is yours.
Hello. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So saya mohon maaf kepada kalian, tetapi itu lebih nyaman bagi saya menggunakan bahasa Inggris, tetapi insyaAllah saya akan juga berkomentar dengan bahasa Indonesia untuk sedikit menjelaskan, tetapi umumnya presentasi saya dengan bahasa Inggris. So my talk is titled Data Science and the Future of Islamic Studies. So over the past 2 decades, the academic study of Islam and Muslim societies has witnessed some important developments, some important new changes. And today I would like to address 2 of those important changes that are affecting Islamic studies, by which I mean the study of the Islamic religion and Muslim societies. So I want to discuss 2 important changes that are happening right now at universities located in Western countries. So one of these changes that we see consists in the use of data science and socioeconomic statistics to understand Muslim societies. And another development consists in the use of data science to understand Muslim cultural artifacts like texts, photos, sound recordings, videos, and the like. So it's often associated with terms like digital humanities, among others. So I'm going to briefly explain these developments and consider their implication for the future of Islam and Muslim societies. So let me begin with the first development, the first change that we're seeing, which is data science and socioeconomic statistics. And I'll explain exactly what these terms mean. So if you say, well, what type of socioeconomic statistics are you talking about? Or what exactly is the definition of data science? Don't worry, I will explain these terms. So jangan khawatir jika saya menyebutkan beberapa istilah seperti statistik sosioekonomik atau data science. Jangan khawatir, saya akan menjelaskan istilah ini sekarang. Okay, so traditional studies of Islam and Muslim societies, conventional studies of Islam and Muslim societies are purely qualitative in character. Some of these qualitative studies rely on the method of ethnographic fieldwork of the type that you find in anthropological research. More often, the qualitative study of Islam and Muslim societies is highly focused on textual analysis. So for instance, scholars of Islamic studies give a lot of attention to texts, especially Arabic language texts that have been written by Muslim scholars over the course of history. So for instance, hadith compilations, theological treatises, biographical dictionaries, and so on. Nevertheless, while qualitative data acquired through ethnographic research or acquired through reading text is very important, it suffers from certain shortcomings. So qualitative data, if taken alone, is often imprecise, and it can be vulnerable to the influence of certain political biases. So to address these problems with qualitative data, over the past 2 decades, an increasing number of scholars of Islam and Muslim societies have decided to give increasing emphasis to quantitative data. So for instance, quantitative statistical data. And this shift towards a greater emphasis on quantitative statistical data is tied to particular technological developments. And here I am referring to the emergence of data science methods and technologies. So there are many different types. So let me go ahead and speak a little bit about what I consider to be socioeconomic statistics. So there are many different types of socioeconomic statistics. We could think of life expectancy. So how many years does a person live on average? Fertility, how many children do people normally have? Marriage divorce rates, what percentage of marriages end in divorce? Urbanization, how many people, what percentage of the population lives in the countryside as opposed to the city? Education and literacy. So for instance, What is the average number of years of school that people have in a particular country? So on average in Indonesia, does the average person, for instance, go to school for 5 years or 10 years or more? Levels of economic growth, homicide rate, levels of happiness or depression. So what is, if you were to have a survey in Indonesia and you were to ask people, on a scale of 1 to 10, rate how happy you are, how many people would give a 10 and how many people would give a 5? So, okay. And how many people might give a 1, indicating, no, I'm pretty sad. You can also check things like levels of belief in God and levels of belief in the afterlife. So for instance, if you gave a survey to people in Indonesia and you asked them, how rate on a scale of 1 to 10, how certain you are in your belief in God, would they give a 10? Would they give a 5? Would they give a 7? These are things which can be measured and increasingly have been measured through international surveys over the past 2 decades. So during this period, not only have there been these efforts to collect different types of socioeconomic statistics, but it has been recognized that different types of statistics can be related to one another in hidden ways. So different types of statistics have hidden relationships among each other. These variables influence one another in hidden ways. And one of the things that people have recognized in particular is that religion, the factor of, what percentage of your society believes in God or the afterlife or these type of issues can have a significant impact on other aspects of your society. So for instance, what GDP, it can have an influence on marriage rates, divorce rates. It can have a effect on things like homicide rates. So in recent years, not only have people been trying to collect together these different types of socioeconomic statistics, including statistics on religiosity, but they've been trying to determine relationships between them, how they influence one another, how they affect one another. So people have asked, and people have asked, very specific questions using methods like regression analysis. So they will say, for instance, imagine you have a country and the level of religious belief goes up by a point. So for instance, imagine you have a society, maybe 70% of people believe in God, and then that goes up to 71%. If the number of people who believe in God goes up 1 percentage point, what is the effect of that on the GDP? What is the effect on that on the homicide rate? What is the effect of that on the marriage rate? And not only that, how might we differ? How might different religions have different effects? So if the number of people who identify as Muslims as opposed to Christians, as opposed to Hindus, increases by 1 point or decreases by 1 point, how does that impact all these different different types of socioeconomic variables? So a lot of the research in this area has been done by economists, like in behavioral economics and economics of religion, but this type of research has also attracted the attention of political scientists, psychologists, sociologists, as well as quantitative-minded anthropologists and historians. So not only do you have a situation where people are collecting statistics on this topic, but one could imagine a world where they collect these statistics and they basically collect them on just by looking at particular countries. So someone might say, okay, well, I'm very interested in how changes in religiosity affect homicide rates in a place like Indonesia. And one could do a study of that. But one of the things that you really see over the past 2 decades is people moving away from studies which just focus on one country. So the question now is, if you're going to do a study of this type, what you want is more and more data so you can make stronger and stronger comparisons. So for instance, if you were interested in this question of how does religion affect homicide rates, you wouldn't just collect data just in Brazil or just in Indonesia. You might collect data on every single country in the world. So, 200 countries in the world. Let's go ahead and systematically collect data from all of these countries. And this is really what has been happening. And not only has this been happening, if you go ahead and you look at the types of data that you have available, a lot of the best data is fairly recent. So for instance, a lot of it dates from the past, let's say, 20 years or 50 years or so. But with time, people are trying to push back the amount of they're trying to go ahead and collect data from earlier and earlier periods. So for instance, right now, if we had a question of how, let's say, for instance, does Islam or Christianity or Hinduism, how do they affect the family structure? So for instance, do they lead to, has Islam always, so today Islam is associated with, for instance, higher fertility, a higher number of children. Has this always been the case? So you can go ahead and look at earlier periods as well. So even though you have the best data from the contemporary period, you can go ahead and let's say look at demographic information that was collected by the colonial empires, by let's say the Netherlands and Indonesia, or by the British in India, and start pushing things back. So you have data on 1900, 1800, and indeed you can even push back even further using other methods till you get, for instance, hundreds of years or even thousands of years in the past. So there are different ways of, for instance, if you go ahead and you start looking at how big cities are, or how many or human remains in different areas, you can start getting ideas about, for instance, population sizes, comparative population sizes, even going back, 500 years, 1,000 years, and then you can start asking, how do different types of religion shape society in terms of their demographic consequences? So these type of statistics, which are becoming more and more comprehensive, not only by providing data on every country in the world, but also by providing data on different historical periods, enables us to make some very important comparisons which regard Muslim populations. So for instance, we can ask, a lot of the times people will make claims about the influence of Islam or the difference between Muslim societies and non-Muslim societies, but these claims are very liable to be influenced by political bias. And even if there are differences, the question is, what is the extent of these differences? How could you quantify these differences? So let's say, for instance, someone were to say, oh, marriage rates in Muslim societies are higher. Maybe, but that may be true, but the difference might be very small. So for instance, maybe in Muslim societies, 70% of people on average are married, whereas in non-Muslim societies, it's 69%. So it's not that big of a difference. Alternatively, it could be a significant difference. So maybe, it's a 10% difference. So one of the things that you can do with this data is you can compare Muslim societies with non-Muslim societies. So what's the average marriage or divorce rate that you find in the US and Brazil as opposed to Pakistan and Morocco? Moreover, not only can we compare between Muslim societies and non-Muslim societies, but we can also compare Muslim societies with one another. So for instance, people often talk about Southeast Asian Islam. I'm sorry, how clear is this? Should I be stopping and providing some comments now, or are you gonna take care of that? Five minutes left? Okay, in that case, I'll probably just stick with the English to move through a little bit faster. Okay. So, for instance, a lot of the times people will say, okay, Southeast Asian Islam is distinctive. It's different from the kind of Islam that you find in the Middle East. It's different from the type of Islam that you might find in South Asia or Sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, if this is true, how can we systematically quantify these differences? So how can we look at all these different areas of life and ask, do Muslims in Southeast Asia have lower levels of homicide than people in other parts, than other Muslim countries? Or do they have higher levels of schooling? Or do they have higher levels of happiness? Or higher levels of God, or higher levels of belief in God, or lower levels of belief in God? This is all very important if we're interested in giving a precise description of how Southeast Asian Islam compares to Islam in other parts of the world. Now, already we have some interesting data on how Muslim populations differ from other populations in the world. So I'll give a couple of examples. All things being equal, Muslim populations have lower levels of homicide, lower levels of suicide, lower levels of alcohol use, lower levels of extramarital sex and HIV infection. These are interesting because a lot of the times people will question whether religion or whether culture really has any effect on society, or whether Orthodox Islam. So sometimes people might say, well, we don't have Islamic states anymore, or Islamic governments, Islamic law is usually not applied in many parts of the Muslim world. So do these attitudes, which may not be applied by the government, are they still affecting society? And you still see that there is some kind of influence that these traditional Islamic doctrines have, even if they're not necessarily implemented by the state. Perhaps, one of the most interesting things that you see with Muslim populations is just their fast growth rate. So Islam is the world's fastest growing religion. So for instance, Muslims were 12.4% of the world's population in 1900. They doubled to 24% in 2020, and they're projected to reach 32% in 2075, overtaking Christians as the world's religious group. Now, this might seem not very surprising, but if one looks at the other religions like Christianity or Hinduism and Buddhism, their share of the world's population, let's say in 1900, and their share of the world's population in 2000 or projected to go forward doesn't really change that much over time. Part of the reason why the Muslim population, so someone might have a question, well, why is the Muslim population changing over time? Part of that is due to higher kind of marriage and fertility, so more children. But part of it is also, it appears that more people convert into Islam than leave. So we can also ask questions, what percentage of Muslims leave Islam over the course of their lives, and what percentage convert? So in most religions, you either get the conversions and the apostasy, it either balances out, or there are more people that leave than that come. But in Islam, you do have, like all religions in the world, you do have a significant minority of people leave Islam, but it's counterbalanced by a larger number of people coming in. So that's also a secondary thing that affects the growth rate. So how does all this relate to data science? So as I indicated earlier, increasing interest in quantitative data is directly tied to the emergence of new data science methods and technologies. So what exactly is data science? Data science can be conceptualized as a blend of computer programming and statistical analysis. This blend is reflected at a simpler level in the use of programs like Microsoft Excel, like spreadsheet programs that you might be familiar with. But at a more advanced level with programming languages like R. And the reason for this is as follows. In order to work with large quantities of statistical data, this data has to be organized in the form of tables. So in the form of rectangular tables of rows and columns, like an Excel spreadsheet or an R data frame. So for instance, imagine you wanted to ask a question like, how does Islam affect social life in countries across the world? You would have one column, you might have one column where you list all the countries in the world. Okay, Brazil, Netherlands, Indonesia, Pakistan. And then in the next column, you might list the religion of all, the dominant religion in all of these countries. Okay, Pakistan, Islam, Brazil, Christianity. And then in your other columns, so you have the country name, you have the religion, and then in your other country columns, you might have something like average number of children per family, average life expectancy, homicide rate in the country. GDP per capita. And then when you have all of this, and you can add on as many variables as you want. You can add in as many columns as you want. And every additional column you add allows you to explore an additional relationship, an additional hidden relationship, or an additional way. So for instance, if you were to add a column on, let's say, patents per capita as a measure of innovation in your country, then you could start seeing how different religions, let's say, affect innovation in different countries across the world. This is exactly the kind of research that people are doing. Now, so once you have the data once the data is created, you can run different types of statistical analysis, like regression analysis, to determine relationships between all of your different variables. And you might determine, okay, it's overall, Islam has some effect on, let's say, marriage rates, but it has a smaller effect on marriage rates than, let's say, the level of education in the country, or the level of GDP in the country. So maybe Islam is, 5% responsible for a higher level of marriage, but an even bigger factor is GDP per capita, or an even bigger factor is the number of years that people are living in school. Now, in reality, the type of analysis that I've described has a lot of complications. So in reality, it's not an easy task to build a massive table. So once you start talking about bringing in dozens or hundreds of possible variables, you have to start combining tables, combining data from a bunch of different sources. And in reality, when you start combining data, so for instance, imagine if you wanted to undertake a exploration of, like, let's say, how religion impacts marriage rates in countries across the world. So you might have a study on Indonesia, a table which deals with this in Indonesia, a table which deals on this with the European Union, and you have to kind of blend those together into a bigger table. And that's not an easy thing to do. On top of that, in reality, whenever you're talking about these tables, there are always errors, there are always missing entries. So you basically need to combine and create and clean up and address errors that you find in all of these different types of tables. Then you need to be able, once you've put them together, you need to undertake proper forms of statistical analysis to discover what exactly are the relationships between the data, the different variables, which you can only do once everything has been input in an ordered way into these tables. And then after that, you need to visualize your results in the form of bar graphs and scatter plots and so on. So this is why, when you talk about why computer programming is very closely tied to statistical analysis, it's because you need the computer programming in order to build the tables, merge the tables together, clean up the tables, run the different forms of regression analysis, and then visualize your results in the form of scatter plots, box plots, and so on. If I'm limited in time, I guess I'll just stop there, and I won't go into cultural artifacts. But when I talk about, I should just mention, though, that just as we can talk about statistics from socioeconomic statistics, we can also talk about statistics in terms of in terms of different texts, like media tweets or books or pictures that we may have digitized. And we can also use data science techniques and technologies to describe them quantitatively as well. So, but maybe I'll talk about that another time.
Thank you very much, Bapak Ariana
Well,
Kisa.
did you want to go ahead and translate, or should I go ahead and come? Okay, let me try first then. So di presentasi ini saya mencoba membicarakan beberapa perubahan yang sekarang terjadi di universitas-universitas yang terletak di negeri-negeri barat. So sekarang ada banyak sarjana lebih. Is this even make sense?
Yes, go on.
Saya mohon maaf, itu lebih mudah bagi saya paham bicara kata-kata bahasa dari orang lain daripada berbicara diriku. Saya juga lebih suka membaca teks-teks daripada berbahasa or menggunakan bahasa dengan orang-orang lain. So saya mohon maaf atas kesalahan saya. Tetapi saya bilang ada beberapa perubahan yang sekarang berlangsung di universitas-universitas di Barat sekarang, di negeri Barat sekarang, dan ada sarjana-sarjana di universitas ini lebih memfokuskan mereka lebih menggunakan sekarang teknologi data science untuk melakukan uraian kuantitatif berkaitan dengan masyarakat Islam dan agama Islam. So sekarang mereka diproses mengumpulkan berbagai macam statistik sosial dari negeri-negeri di seluruh dunia, dan mereka menggunakan teknologi data science untuk membuat untuk meletakkan semua ini di komputer dan untuk mengungkap hubungan antara berbagai variabel yang mungkin tersembunyi. So mereka menggunakan teknologi ini bagi tujuan itu. Mungkin kamu bisa memberikan penjelasan yang lebih rincian daripada saya dan lebih precise. Saya mohon maaf. Khususnya karena saya tidak sekarang di restoran meminta nasi atau sesuatu seperti ini. Ketika seseorang mau membicarakan data science atau statistik atau regression analysis di bahasa itu lebih sulit. So saya mungkin ya.
Thank you, Arya. Saya mencoba menyampaikan apa yang sudah disampaikan. Insya Allah 80% sudah ditangkap, Bapak Ibu ya. Jadi tadi sudah dijelaskan tentang apa yang disebut dengan data science. Jadi pertama-tama tadi beliau menjanjikan definisi dari data science itu tadi. Jadi kurang lebih data science itu ada ilmu pengetahuan, ya, science, tentang berbagai koleksi computerized collection of information on particular aspect. Jadi kumpulan informasi yang dikumpulkan dalam bentuk digital melalui penggunaan teknologi komputer tentang berbagai aspek dari fenomena duniaan. Nah, data ini setelah dikumpulkan kemudian dibandingkan atau dianalisis dengan berbagai cara. Pertama dibandingkan satu sama lain, dan yang kedua dicari kebenarannya, diverifikasi kebenarannya, karena di antara data yang dikumpulkan kadang-kadang ada kekeliruan, ya. Kemudian dikonfirmasi dengan kenyataannya di lapangan. Jadi berbagai data ini kemudian setelah dikumpulkan, dibandingkan, kemudian dianalisis. Pembandingannya ini kemudian bisa dibandingkan antara data masyarakat muslim satu dengan masyarakat muslim lain, atau dibandingkan antara masyarakat muslim dengan masyarakat dari agama lain. Pembandingan ini juga bisa dibandingkan antara satu negara, masyarakat muslim di satu negara dengan masyarakat muslim di negara lain. Juga dibandingkan antara masyarakat muslim dan non-muslim di negara yang sama, atau masyarakat muslim dan non-muslim di negara yang lain. Jadi proses pembandingan ini akan menghasilkan temuan-temuan yang lebih banyak lagi. Pembandingan ini bisa mengenai berbagai aspek dari kehidupan dunia, kehidupan sosial manusia, misalnya tentang homicide rate, itu berarti angka bunuh diri, misalnya angka rata-rata bunuh diri di suatu tempat di kalangan masyarakat muslim satu dengan yang lain, ya. Kemudian angka happiness rate, jadi angka kebahagiaan, ya. Di dalam angka-angka atau rata-rata kebahagiaan ini bisa di dalamnya diperinci lagi aspek-aspek dari kebahagiaan itu apa saja. Kemudian adalah angka keberagamaan, religiosity rate. Nah, Kemudian ada lagi angka yang membandingkan misalnya pengaruh GDP, Gross Domestic Product. Jadi produk domestik bruto dari suatu masyarakat yang mayoritas Muslim, ya, itu pengaruhnya terhadap angka-angka yang tadi, ya, keberagamaannya, kemudian aspek sosial, misalnya berapa banyak jumlah perceraian terkait dengan angka pernikahan dan perceraian dan berbagai masalah rumah tanggaan terkait dengan keberagamaan, terkait dengan satu sosial ekonomi dan sebagainya. Jenis analisisnya itu ada yang terkenal di antara mereka yang namanya regression analysis, analisis regresi. Ini yang orang-orang dari statistik yang memahami. Nah, Oke, di antara pertemuannya adalah misalnya yang sudah populer menyatakan bahwa Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. Berarti Islam adalah agama dengan tingkat pertumbuhan yang paling tinggi. Oke, itu sudah populer di kalangan kita, tapi di dalamnya bisa diperinci lagi kenapa bisa seperti itu. Ada temuan lainnya di antara bahwa ternyata kebanyakan masyarakat Muslim ini fertility rate itu angka kesuburannya itu lebih tinggi daripada yang lain. Nah, kemudian di kalangan masyarakat Muslim di Barat itu ada pertambahan juga bukan hanya dari kelahiran tapi juga dari konversi, dari dari peralihan agama, yang konversi. Tapi perlu dibandingkan juga kalau dibandingkan dengan agama lain, ya misalnya masyarakat Kristen dan masyarakat Hindu, mereka juga rupanya punya klaim yang sama. Mereka menjadi agama yang tumbuh pesat juga. Nah ini jadi perlu disadari bahwa ternyata apa yang kita pahami selama ini sebagai agama paling cepat di dunia, mungkin ada beberapa bagian dari masyarakat negara lain itu yang kurang begitu setuju karena mereka juga mempunyai klaim yang mirip-mirip seperti itu. Dan banyak lagi yang bisa didapatkan mengenai atau didapat dari ilmu data science ini. Tapi yang jelas yang dibutuhkan itu adalah teknologi, ya. Jadi komputernya itu harus cepat dan punya server yang sangat besar. Jadi itulah kemudian yang menjadi tantangan bagi kita semua untuk bisa mengejar atau bisa mengikuti perkembangan dalam data science itu melalui penguasaan kita terhadap teknologi komputer berikut berbagai konsekuensi finansial dan ekonominya. Saya pikir itu yang bisa saya tangkap dari uraian Dr. Ariana Kisah tadi. Barangkali mau ditambahkan, silakan Bu Radia.
Terima kasih Bapak Mujibur Rahman PhD SD Interpreter. Saya kira sudah cukup mewakili tentang data science ya. Saya melihat begitu banyak pertanyaan di dalam benak Bapak dan Ibu sekalian, tapi tolong kita tunda dulu, baik itu untuk Bapak Farid Fahrudin terkait dengan decoding and encoding, kemudian tentang kajian etnografi menggunakan komputer, data science dari Bapak Ariana Kisah. Tunda dulu Bapak Ibu karena kita masih punya satu pembicara lagi ya, pembicara yang sudah kita tunggu-tunggu dari tadi, yaitu Ibu Hulut Al-Azharma. And please let me explain about Ibu Hulut Al-Azharma short biography. Beliau ini adalah dosen Al-Walid in Globalized Muslim World, di mana research interest-nya terkait dengan studi lingkungan di Muslim World Contemporary. Kemudian Ibu Hulut Al-Azharma holds a PhD Anthropology and Comparative Study of Religion dari University of Groningen. And PhD tesisnya, disertasinya terkait dengan socio-cultural embeddedness of Muslim pilgrimage in Moroccan everyday. Dan hari ini beliau akan berbagi dengan kita semua terkait dengan Muslim pilgrimage in the digital age. Ini menarik tentu Bapak Ibu ya, karena in Indonesia we have already postponed pilgrimage for 2 years Ibu Hulut, dari 2020 dan 2021. Nah ini baru ada lagi di 2022. Dan tenang saja kita punya Bapak Prof. Mujibur Rahman PhD sebagai interpreter, karena Ibu Hulut akan berbicara in full English. Oke, Ibu Hulut please, the time is yours.
Makasih. That's the only Indonesian I know. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Allow me first to thank the organizers and the other speakers. It's a privilege and honor to be here in Indonesia and to be amongst you today as well. As the title of my presentation indicates, I will be talking about the Muslim pilgrimage and how by studying the pilgrimage as a case study, we can look at Muslims and Muslims' everyday life in the digital age and what debates does this bring forward in the lives of Muslims. In the second slide, there is a brief outline about my presentation. So I'll start with a background about the Muslim pilgrimage and why I chose this topic to study in particular. And then I will explain some background about the study and about the importance of pilgrimage in the lives of Muslims. Followed by a zoom in on the digital side. So how does Islam today or the pilgrimage today look on social media and other digital platforms before I conclude? Mas, would you like to translate or later? Okay, you got this, right? Okay, perfect. So in the next slide, we see a picture that most of you probably familiar with, which is the Grand Mosque of Mecca and the Kaaba as the center of it. Show of hands, if you have been to Hajj or Umrah, if you have been to Mecca ever? Anybody? 1, 2, okay, a few people. Have anybody from your family, like your father, your mother, your uncle, been to Hajj? Or to Umrah?
Siapa yang sudah naik haji dari keluarganya juga?
Okay, I see notes. So the information that I'll be sharing in this part, I think is familiar to many of you because Mecca and especially the Kaaba are very important in the lives of Muslims. We have to perform Hajj if we are physically and financially able once in our lifetime. And we talk about the Hajj. So those who've been to Hajj talk about what they saw there. When they come back, we call them Hajj or Hajjah as a sign of respect. And also, we always remember the pilgrimage experience. We face the Kaaba when we pray 5 times a day, for example, and so on. So the presence of Mecca and the presence of the Kaaba are very important in the lives of Muslims, and so is the Hajj as an experience. And that's why I decided to study this phenomena, not only as something that Muslims have to do once in their lifetime, but as a religious experience that influences people's lives away from Mecca. So I took Morocco as a case study, and I looked at how the pilgrimage features in Moroccan everyday lives. For example, how people prepare to go to Hajj, how they, in their everyday lives, talk about what happened when they went to Hajj, and how they try to live their lives in a way that respects, let's say, the new title, Hajj or Hajjah, when they come back. I also looked at the politics of the Hajj from the Saudi side and the Moroccan side, and its importance in construction of identity and nationalism, and also looked at cultural aspects related to the Hajj. So how it features in songs and stories that people tell, and so on. To conclude that to study a Muslim ritual, it's not only important to study what people do when they do the ritual, so what people do when they go on Hajj, but also how does a Muslim live that ritual in their daily lives within these conflicts that we have in our daily lives. So our lives are not only religious, there are also other mundane or secular aspects that Muslims have to deal with in modern daily life. So in the next slide, we see a group of pilgrims returning from Hajj. And for these pilgrims, maybe similar in Indonesia, when they come back, they are welcomed in the airport, their relatives bring them flowers, they have music and so on, because it is a sign of accomplishment for Muslims and a sign that they have been to the most important center for Islam, the Mecca, and performed the Hajj. And when we talk about the Hajj, and when those who return from the Hajj often tell us stories about their experience, in the next slide, we see some of the pictures that they might share. For example, they would share photos of the Kaaba and then the pilgrims circulating it. And in many of those pictures, we see the Muslim Ummah, or the Muslim community who are performing the Hajj together as one mass that is unified. And this unity is very important. It's important in the narratives of pilgrims, but it's also an important aspect of the Hajj experience itself. The Hajj is something that brings all Muslims together from all over the world. They have different colors, different religions, different political backgrounds, and so on. But when they come to Mecca, they come expecting to be the same and expecting to be equal before God. Scholars of pilgrimage, like Edith and Victor Turner, called this communitas. And communitas is an expression that means community or unity of a community. And for a long time, those who talked about pilgrimage studies talked about this concept of communitas, that those who come to a pilgrimage center, and when they, despite their differences. And we can see this in the Hajj experience. We can see it, for example, in this picture of pilgrims doing the same rituals. We can see it with pilgrims eating together, or with pilgrims doing the standing on Arafah together, and so on. But also today we have not only the sense of communitas, not only the sense of unity, but because people are different, and because we have so many differences individually, but also with the authorities that organize the Hajj, the people who go on Hajj have what later scholars called contestation, which means conflict that arises during the pilgrimage experience. And these conflicts, for example, we can see today because of different political stances of the organization of the Hajj, and also because of issues within the Hajj management within countries themselves. So, but also because of the advancement of media today, the Hajj is more present in our lives. So it's no more that those only who went to Hajj could see the Kaaba or Mecca anymore. Because, for example, in the next slide, we have TV channels, satellite TV channels, where we can have Mecca or Medina on our TV 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if we wish to. So these advancements of the media made it possible for us to, for these technologies or for these pictures to come to our houses and be part of its everyday life. However, that said, this brings also to our mind these aspects of contestation and these aspects of conflicts that this modernity brings to our experience. So one example in the next slide is the advancement of the modernity of the construction or the architecture around the Grand Mosque of Mecca. So in the past, the Kaaba for many people was the center of the pilgrimage experience, and I believe it still is. But today we have all this construction around the Kaaba. So the Kaaba looks tiny compared to these massive towers that are around it to accommodate the growing numbers of pilgrims who go to Hajj. Of course, some people would say, this is great. We have better hotels, we have better services today than the past. But some people say, yes, but not everyone can afford these hotels, for example. And what does this say about the unity or the equality that Muslim pilgrims should experience during the Hajj experience? Another example of this contestation is the experience of Muslim women during the Hajj. So in the next slide, we see photos from the Rawda in the Prophet's Mosque in Medina, where women are only allowed certain hours during the day to visit the Rawda and pray there. And when they do so, there are these huge barriers, plastic barriers that are put as walls to prevent women from reaching or even seeing the tomb of the Prophet. And for many women who, like all Muslims, wish to greet the Prophet and wish to visit that sacred place, when they reach there and they are not able to see that, this creates a lot of frustration and a lot of anxiety because of the limitations that and the discrimination as well that women have during their experience. So these are like the main debates that exist between those who wish and they dream of the ideal of a unity pilgrimage where people are equal and united, and between these modern advancements that makes the experience more and more complicated, and the digital turn allows us to see it even more clear today. Would you like to? Okay. And then I'll move to the digital part.
Ya, Dr. Khulud baru saja menjelaskan hasil penelitian beliau dalam memahami fenomena haji yang ada di yang sana setiap tahun diadakan. Jadi suasana haji sebagaimana diketahui ini memiliki suasana yang unik. Ada dari beberapa gambar menunjukkan bahwa ada penyambutan dan persiapan dan penyambutan yang kurang lebih ya mirip-mirip ya antara satu negara dengan negara yang lain. Kemudian beliau juga meneliti hubungan sosial yang sekitar itu, bagaimana mereka bukan hanya bagaimana mereka melaksanakan haji, tapi juga berbagai efek sosial atau aspek sosial yang mengitari apa yang mereka kerjakan di sana, apa yang para jamaah kerjakan di sana. Hal yang pertama terlihat adalah adanya citra persatuan, ya, unifikasi, citra persatuan yang terlihat dari suasana bertemunya jamaah haji dari satu negara dengan negara yang lain. Beliau memunculkan suatu istilah dalam dunia antropologi yang namanya komunitas, ya, komunitas. Kita sudah biasa memahami komunitas. Jadi from Victor Turner, right? Community. Ya, Victor Turner, jadi antropologi. Jadi ada hubungan yang lebih erat antara satu orang dengan orang lain karena mereka berada dalam tempat yang sama untuk melakukan hal yang sama. Karena mereka berasal dari negeri-negeri yang berbeda, tapi kemudian ketika sampai di sana, mereka harus melakukan upacara yang sama dengan pakaian yang sama dan berbagai etika dan etiket yang sama. Melahirkan solidaritas yang cukup membuat mereka merasa bersatu satu sama lain, disebut komunitas. Ya. Nah, kemudian beliau juga meneliti ya berbagai fenomena sosial, misalnya konflik yang terjadi ya, yang walaupun di dalam komunitas ya tetap tapi ada konflik antara satu dengan satu lain ya, namanya negara yang dari bangsa yang berbeda, mereka tentu ada sedikit-sedikit bentrokan satu sama lain berbagai hal yang sifatnya remeh-temeh maupun yang serius antara haji dengan jamaah haji satu dengan jamaah haji yang lain ataupun jamaah haji dengan jamaah non haji ya, yang masyarakat setempat ya. Satu aspek komunitas lain adalah adanya channel media yang menyiarkan langsung apa yang terjadi di dalam periode haji itu ke dunia luar secara langsung. Dan yang terakhir ini masalah pengalaman wanita ketika berhaji, mereka ternyata mengalami ya mendapatkan perlakuan yang tidak seluruhnya sama dengan apa yang dialami oleh para laki-laki. Misalnya mereka tidak mendapat keluasan waktu yang sepanjang laki-laki. Jadi ada pembatasan-batasan waktu dalam berhaji. Ya, ini mungkin kalau Bapak Ibu sekalian bisa mengomentari nanti pada saat tanya jawab bisa. Oke.
So like everything that has been affected by this digital turn in our lives, the Hajj experience has also its own aspects that were affected by the digital, this digital influence. In the next slide, we see, for example, this T-shirt that has a phone screen printed on it, and it says, "Mecca, I must go." And this is like one way that like young Muslims today express their longing, let's say, to go to Mecca and to perform the Hajj. But despite this, the pilgrimage experience is not easier. It is easier in terms of there are better hotels today and better roads for transportation. You can take a flight, which is easier to fly to Mecca than in the past, which those who wanted to go to pilgrimage took months and sometimes years to reach Mecca. But at the same time, today it's even more bureaucratic because of modern nation states, borders, application processes. For example, I learned that in Indonesia, people have to wait on average 40 years now to be able to go on Hajj. So these limitations make it harder and harder for Muslims to go on Hajj. But also with digital technologies, it becomes more accessible to see what is happening during the Hajj, and for those who went to Hajj to share their experiences almost instantly with those at home. And of course, the Hajj experience itself became easier because of these digital technologies. So in the next slide, we see only a few of the different mobile apps that somebody who goes to Hajj can use on their smartphone in order to facilitate their Hajj experience. So they can get directions in some of these apps. They can learn about the history of the pilgrimage or where to go to perform different rituals and so on. So this digital technology is enabling many pilgrims to have easier access to the religious space. However, for many people who do not have the access to smartphones, for example, or they are of older age or they are poorer, this becomes a hindrance, and it becomes a difficulty for them to be able to express and share their experience. This also created an issue for many pilgrims who wanted to share their experience online. So one of the very famous, let's say, hashtags about the Hajj is the Hajj Selfie. And in the next slide, we see some examples of those Hajj selfies that those who go to Hajj take photos of themselves in front of the holy spaces, and they post them online. And for example, you might recognize Muhammad Salah if you are a football fan. Like he went to Hajj for, I think this was Umrah, and he took a photo in front of the Kaaba. So this was important for him to share with his fans, not only Muslim fans, but also non-Muslims as part of his like self-representation. But also for many Muslims, this creates, again, some sort of contestation between those who go to Hajj and they want to share with those at home their experience. So they take this selfie to say, look, I've been to Hajj, and people would comment on their photos and so on. And then between those and others who would say, but why do you need to take a selfie in front of the holy space? The holy space should be the center of your attention, not your camera or your phone. And this creates debate online often between those people who would say, these people are going to worship themselves, not to worship God. And that's why they are taking these photos and they're giving their back to the Kaaba, for example, and giving their face to their phone screen. And of course, this is very, very contested among people who are against this practice. But in the next slide, we see how it is often the case. There are debates about, are we there to take photos of ourselves and share them on social media? Or are we there to worship God and focus on the worship or the act of worship itself? And for many people who would take their photos and share them, they would justify this also by saying that this is an experience of a lifetime. Some people saved for a long time to be able to go on Hajj or Umrah. Some people, they might not ever go there again, or a member of their family might not go again. So they want to take the photos also to remember this experience later and to document the feelings and the emotions that they had in these holy spaces. Something that other people do in the next slide is that when they are in front of the Kaaba or in front of the holy space, they would write the name of somebody who's back home, and then they take a photo with the name of that person and send it to them as a way of telling them, we are thinking of you in this holy space, or you're with us now. And you might have received one of those if you have a relative or a friend who've been to Hajj and so on. So the people would also use these social media platforms like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram to share with those back home the experience, those who are unable to be there physically. So this is, in media studies, they call this affordances. So people afford now or can afford to share these experiences, whilst in the past, we did not hear about what happened in the Hajj until the pilgrim came back home safely. And then they would narrate the stories that they go through. However, this ability of almost instantly or in the same second take a photo and post it online created many debates among Muslims as well. So, and it created something called in media studies context collapse. In the next picture, where people now can take photos and post them about things also that they don't like. So people would take photos in front of the Kaaba, in front of Mount Arafah, and so on, of things that they appreciate and like, but also they'll take photos of garbage, they'll take photos of bad hotel services, they'll take photos of bad streets and so on, to complain about that the pilgrimage should be better than this, or the experience should be better than this. So this context collapse is when this difference that digital media creates. Whilst in the past, people waited until they hear the stories from those who actually went to Hajj. And by then, like if the journey takes weeks, for example, for people to come back, when they do come back, they would share the positive experiences. They would share how emotional they were when they saw the Kaaba, or crying at different points, how happy they were to perform the ritual. But very rarely they would share the bad things. And so today with social media, you can share all these experiences almost instantly. And this also creates an issue for governments who are or that are managing the Hajj today. So for example, in Morocco, where the government is the one responsible for managing the Hajj experience, it's important for the government that people would convey a positive image about their Hajj, because that means the government is doing its job. However, with social media, it is not only the story of the government that people have access to. People have access to the stories the pilgrims themselves post on social media. So in the next slide, we see a picture by Moroccan pilgrims who demonstrated in Mina because the services they were offered there were very bad. And this, of course, contradicted the image that the national news in Morocco was portraying about the experience in the national TV. So in the next slide, we see a photo from the national TV, where the reporter interviewed two pilgrims. Next slide, please. And in the two reports, we see pilgrims sitting in these fancy hotel rooms, very nice decorations, and literally from their room, they can see the Kaaba. So they're living in these very fancy hotels near the mosque in Mecca. Whereas the pictures that people posted online were quite the opposite. They were living in very, very far hotels with very bad services, and this ability to be able to share these stories almost immediately online created a debate locally among the story the government tries to portray. So in the next slide, we see how people posted on Facebook about their negative experiences in Mecca, and that led the government and the parliament to take a stand to support those pilgrims and to investigate what actually was going on in Mecca. And here we see how social media also it negated, or it kind of challenged the authority or the official authority of the government and other authorities as well, as we will see in the other example I will give. How long do I have? 5 minutes. So I'll give one more example, but would you like to interpret first? Okay.
Oke, kita lanjutkan dengan penjelasan tadi. Beliau menyatakan bahwa dengan semakin banyaknya jamaah yang semakin banyak orang yang ingin berhaji dan sekarang terjadi modernisasi politik, maka berhaji itu menjadi semakin istilahnya menantang ya, karena ada pembatasan birokrasi, kemudian perbedaan aspek politik, batas-batasan itu tadi imigrasi dan sebagainya, itu membuat semakin panjangnya, misalnya orang yang harus berhaji menunggu sampai belasan yang puluhan tahun. Nah, ini kemudian menjadi semakin menantang ketika orang yang berhaji itu menggunakan media sosial, aplikasi medsos. Nah, misalnya ada yang berselfie, wifi dan sebagainya. Ini kemudian terjadi yang istilahnya adalah contestation. Jadi terjadi persaingan antara satu aspek sosial dengan aspek yang lain. Pada mulanya yang menjadi fokus adalah bendanya itu adalah Ka'bah, kemudian ritual haji itu sendiri. Dahulu seperti itu, itulah yang menjadi fokus. Tapi kemudian terjadi kontestasi atau persaingan di mana fokus itu tidak khusyuk lagi terhadap Ka'bah dan hajinya, tapi pada dirinya sendiri. Yaitu ketika dia setelah memfoto dirinya sendiri atau keluarganya, kemudian dia menyiarkan ke medsos sampai ke tanah air, ya, sehingga fokusnya berubah. Ya, dia jadi memindahkan fokus orang yang tadinya kepada Ka'bah dan haji menjadi kepada pribadi-pribadi orang. Ya. Nah, kemudian juga ada istilahnya affordance. Jadi ada perbedaannya. Terlihat ada orang yang bisa berhaji dan ada yang tidak bisa berhaji. Kemudian ada orang yang bisa berhaji dengan fasilitas yang cukup mewah, misalnya di lantai berapa, kemudian melihat langsung sholat di kamar tapi menghadap Ka'bah langsung ke sana, misalnya itu. Atau kemudian ada juga yang mendapat perlakuan yang kurang nyaman, ya, sehingga mereka sampai berdemo. Misalnya tadi ada gambar jamaah haji dari Maroko yang berdemo terhadap pemerintahnya sendiri. Jadi istilahnya lagi tadi adalah konteks collapse. Jadi hancurnya konteksnya, karena konteks suasana yang hadir di sana mestinya adalah suasana religius, ya. Sebelum ada medsos, yang selalu sampai ke berita yang sampai ke tanah air adalah berita yang baik-baik. Tapi kemudian ketika ada medsos, maka ditampilkan pula foto-foto tempat sampah, ada yang gambar-gambar yang tidak nyaman dilihat dan sebagainya. Jadi konteks ibadahnya berubah, ya. Bukan hanya berubah tapi hancur, ya. Ada sebagian yang diakibatkan oleh datangnya berita-berita dan gambar-gambar yang begitu mudahnya, ya, melakukan. Dan itu akhirnya disalahpahami, itu disebut dengan konteks kolaps tadi. Ini menghadirkan masalah juga bagi pemerintah masing-masing, karena terlihatlah betapa mereka ada pemerintah yang berhasil memperlakukan haji, jamaah hajinya dengan baik, ada pemerintah yang tidak berhasil, tidak seluruhnya berhasil melayani umatnya sendiri.
So I'll skip the next slide, but I'll go to one.
Yes, Ibu Hulut, because the time is very limited. We're going to have question and answer after this, so it will be 5
Can I
minutes
conclude?
left. Yes, 5
Okay.
minutes only. Yeah.
So I'll skip the other examples, but what I want to say is that people now are not only challenging the political opinions and political authorities online because of these affordances, but they're challenging like religious authorities, preachers. They're challenging like the management of the Hajj and so on, because they are able to express their stories online and share them. And this also creates transnational networks between Muslims who are able to see these stories online and comment and make comments on them. But skip to conclusion, please. Or more. So with these advances of technology that are being introduced about the Hajj, including if you Google Vision 2030 of the Hajj, you'll see more even advancements of technology that will become used during the Hajj experience. And these create a lot of problems now. One is the issues of equality, as I mentioned before, between the pilgrims, and how people who come from remote areas, for example, or have no access to mobile technologies and smartphones, or even cannot read and write, will be able to perform the Hajj. And what does this mean about who is being targeted as future pilgrims? Like mostly like maybe middle class or upper class, educated, financially affluent, and so on people, young people as well. So what happens to the other Muslims who wish to perform the pilgrimage? And what do these technologies mean in the future as well? So to conclude, I think the lives of Muslims in general, and we see in the example of the Hajj, are complex. They're not only about religion and what people believe, but also about the practices and how religion becomes part of these practices in their everyday lives. In the next slide, also, we see like the pilgrimage. To see it fully, it's important to look at how the pilgrims interact, not only physically, but on the digital spaces today, including the stories they share and the narratives they tell about the pilgrimage experience. And in today's digital media, there is a fine line between the personal and what goes viral. So what people kept to themselves in the past is no longer the same today, because people can almost instantly post online their experiences and share with the others. And I think there is a need to study even more what is changing because of these digital technologies. We are only beginning to realize what effects this digital boom may have on the Hajj experience and the meanings attached to it. And we'll see more in the future, hopefully. And I'll finish here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ibu Dr. Hulut Al-Azdarma. Beliau memaparkan tentang kaitan antara pergi berhaji dan bagaimana teknologi telah membentuk atau reshape pandangan orang tentang pergi berhaji, begitu Bu Hulut ya. And for your additional information, Ibu Hulut, there are many Bapak Haji and Ibu Hajah in this room actually ya. Yeah, because in South Kalimantan ini termasuk the province that always go haji again and again. After setelah datang berhaji, sebelum langsung mendaftar lagi untuk berhaji lagi begitu ya, sama dengan South Sulawesi actually. Ya, so there are many Bapak dan Ibu Haji in this room, Ibu Hulut. And kita sampai kepada sesi tanya jawab, karena waktunya sangat terbatas, saya membuka dua sesi saja ya, dan dua pertanyaan pertama untuk satu sesi. I will respect your honor to mention your name clearly. Kemudian sebutkan juga untuk pertanyaan untuk presenter yang mana, speaker yang mana, apakah itu untuk Bapak Farid Farudin atau Ibu Hulut Al-Azdarma ataupun untuk Bapak Aryana Kisa yang di sebelah saya. Kemudian baru kalau ada pertanyaan should you speak your answer in bahasa Indonesia, we will have Bapak interpreter ya to interpret what you're going to say. Oke. Untuk yang pertama Ibu Andi Irlina. Kemudian satu lagi silahkan saya minta Ibu yang di ujung sana yang coklat, saya mohon kepada panitia untuk membantu mendistribusikan mikrofon kepada penanya. Terima kasih. Kami persilakan Ibu Andi Irlina.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let me speak English, yeah, because this is international seminar, so I would like to speak English. Okay. I have two questions in this case, but my first question refers to the first speaker and the second speaker. Yeah, I'm really interested with the their presentation today, but there is a phenomenon where people consider Muslim as a big threat, yeah, of them. Yeah, I just directly say that. So that harassment, torture, and even massacre of minority of Muslim occur in various countries, like in India and etc. And of course, even nowadays, after the United Nations announced to stop the Islamophobia movement, the sad thing is Islamophobia is also happening in Indonesia. Yeah, in Indonesia, in our beloved country where Muslim is the majority. Okay, my question is, what can be done digitally so that people get to know that Islam is rahmatul lil alamin, rahmatan lil alamin, that all that will bring happiness to all of the human beings all over the world. Okay, that's my first question. My second question is for the third speaker. It's about the pilgrimage to Mecca. Yeah, I don't want to discuss about how social media can influence the people who doing pilgrimage, but I emphasize in your explanation about the unity of Islam all over the world. Yeah, I experienced at the beginning of the year 2020, I went to not pilgrimage but Umrah. When I came to Masjid what is in Medina, yeah, in Medina, I entered the mosque and then I take a place beside very middle-aged women, a middle-aged woman from Turkey, and then directly he says something that is very, I don't understand the meaning, but his eyes is like that. To my understand, don't say that. That's you are not allowed to say that. Oh, I was very scared at the time, and then fortunately, a young girl or a teenager came to me and speak to me in English, and then take me to her mother's place to pray. Yeah, that's what I want to emphasize, that there is still a gap. Yeah, so there is no. That's my question: is what can be done, or what can government or we are as the university lecturers can do, or maybe the leaders of university can do to solve this problem, so Muslim all over the world can really aware that they are brother and sister in Islam. Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you Ibu Andirina. Please Ibu Rabiatul Adawiyah, if I'm not mistaken. Oh ya, di sebelahnya. Minta tolong sebutkan nama Ibu dan pertanyaan untuk siapa. Terima kasih.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Izinkan saya menyampaikan pertanyaannya dalam bahasa Inggris. I have three questions for all the speakers. Thank you for coming here to Borneo Province, and we welcome you. Firstly, to Mr. Farid Farudin. So my question is, in this digital era, do you think that there is a risk to polarization in Muslim society in regards to the various information overload at our current level of cultural society values and education? My second question is to Mr. Ariana Kisa. What is your opinion about the level of reliability and validity in measurement of Islamic religiosity in quantitative research methods? And thirdly, for Ms. Khulud, I would like to know and probably share to you a little bit in our Banjaris society, we have here our tribe. There's this common culture with social and economic values of visiting ancestors' grave. So it's also a cultural and religious magnet tour destination in our part of Indonesia. So what do you think are the effects of the hijrah, the pilgrimage, economic-wise to the welfare of the community, be it internationally or locally? Thank you.
Mohon maaf, Ibu siapa, Bu?
Novita, Bu.
Novita, okay, thank you.
Terima kasih, Bu. Assalamualaikum
Yes.
warahmatullahi
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi. Could you please to answer it directly or? In this first session, we're going to have 2 questions only, and then we're going to move on if we have a lot of time. Yeah, so first question is from Ibu Andi Irlina for Parit and Arya actually, yeah. I have 1 question for both of you together, and then it will be, it dealt with the minority and harassment, Pak Parit and Pak Arya, and in various countries, and it is about Islamophobia and what can be done digitally in this digital era, that Islam is rahmatan lil alamin, from Ibu Andi. And also for the third speaker, what can we do as the university academics dealing with the pilgrimage in this digital era? Thank you. Please, you may answer this question. Parit atau Pak Arya? Yeah, Pak Arya, please.
Okay, I can actually answer both of the questions that were directed at me because in a sense they're related to one another. Let me begin by answering the second question. So the second question pertains to the reliability of statistical survey data concerning Muslim communities. So of course there is always a danger, especially when you're talking about surveys, asking people questions that perhaps they won't answer correctly. Perhaps even there is social pressure such that they do not answer the questions directly. So for instance, imagine you ask someone, you know, do you believe that it is okay to have extramarital sex? Or do you believe that it is important to take care of your parents and their old age? Or do you believe that it's important to have a big family? They might say, due to social pressure, yeah, of course, extramarital sex is wrong and we should take care of our parents and our old age, we should have children, but maybe that doesn't really reflect their attitudes. So that's why whenever you talk about survey data, you need to complement that by other types of data which don't involve asking questions. So for instance, if you want to understand attitudes regarding sex outside of marriage in a country, you should also look at things like HIV rates in the country from the hospitals as a way of complementing that data. You can also look at search results. So for instance, how often are people searching for kind of licentious sexual material from a given country? That might also be relevant to assessing this question. Similarly, if, for instance, if someone says, oh, I really believe that it's important to take care of my family and have a big family, you can look at fertility. So for instance, how many children are people actually having in the country? If you're really committed to having to building families, you should presumably have a higher number of children in your country than a country where people say that families aren't important. Or if you say, I need to take care of my parents in their old age, okay, see what percentage of people in that country live in nursing homes as opposed to with their kin. With their family members. So these are ways, so I 100% agree that there are issues when it comes to reliability. Or let's say, for instance, religious belief. Let's say, for instance, people in our country, people in one country, they say, oh, we have very high levels of religious belief. How can you check that? You can see, for instance, a per capita concentration of mosques or houses of worship with respect to that community as opposed to another community. So when you have a community, Buddhist, Christian, Muslim, don't just depend on what they say, look at other indicators. So for instance, the number of places of worship that they have, what that concentration is, that will help you go ahead and verify that you're getting an accurate and complete picture. Okay, so that is how I would answer that question. So I would say as long as we're not simply relying on people's own answers in surveys and we're checking those answers against other forms of data, we can consider that statistical data to be relatively reliable, although somewhat imperfect, of course. Now, with respect to the issue of Islamophobia, why is there Islamophobia seemingly everywhere? I mean, I have my own views on this that a lot of people might disagree with, but I will go ahead and share them anyway because because I was asked. And I've written about some stuff which is related to this answer that I'm going to give. I believe this isn't so unique to me. A lot of people believe that human beings have particular forms of behavior, such as religion, such as marriage, such as family life, such as forming a group and trying to preserve that group's culture or tradition, that these are tendencies that you find throughout human history and in every society on earth. And they are biologically rooted tendencies. However, those tendencies limit certain values, which are very much embraced by liberal societies, by modernizing societies. So for instance, religion is something which limits your freedom to some extent. It says, you have to fast, you can't eat pork. Marriage is something which limits your sexual freedom in a variety of ways. So is family. Oh, I have to take care of my parents in my old age. That limits your freedom. It also generates all kinds of inequality. So for instance, respect for parents generates certain types of inequality. Now, if you're living now one of the things that I think that you find statistically with Muslim populations is they value freedom, they value equality, but they say freedom and equality are wonderful things, but certain limitations are justifiable for the sake of worshiping God, certain limitations on freedom. Certain limitations are justifiable for the sake of preserving family, for the sake of preserving marriage. And Muslim communities, more than any other community in the world, have taken this position. And so quantitatively speaking, they have a higher level of religiosity, a higher level of family values. So what does that mean? That means that every single other society in the world, not to say that Christianity, that Hinduism, that Buddhism doesn't also have these kind of family values or religious values, but over the past 200 years, they've been more liberalized. Their religiosity has dropped more. Their commitment to family values has dropped more. So in every country on earth, people say Muslims are bad because they're the human rights violators. They're the people who are backwards. They're the people who are not modern. Because relative to these other groups, Muslim groups have a higher level of religiosity, a higher level of respect for the sanctity of marriage, family, and also preserving communal traditions. So for instance, in a country like the United States, you'll have people saying, like, I'm a conservative Christian, but I believe in freedom and equality way more than the Muslims. Or for instance, Hindus or Buddhists will say, yeah, we love our Hindutva. We love our Hindu religion. We love our Buddhist religion in Myanmar. But the problem with the Muslims is still they're too religious or they're too family oriented. So I think for that reason, Muslims get criticized by a lot of other groups because there have been these changes across the world, but these changes have affected other groups to a greater extent than Muslims.
Thank you, Bapak Rina Kisah, for your answer. Bapak Farid Paharudin, and then there will be Ibu Haulut after this. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the questions, Bu Rina and Bu Novita. Well, just for the last one, Islamophobia comes from two sides. Yeah, from Muslims itself, if we take the case of Muslim, and then non-Muslims, as we always understand. For the Muslims, sometimes we also demonstrate or show them a lot of things that make them phobia with Islam. Yeah. At the same time, with their ignorance, non-Muslims could be in the same position by understanding that Islam is such that scary things. So well, there are a lot of answers if you ask how to avoid Islamophobia digitally, for example. I would just, well, in addition to other solutions for that one, I suggest that we might need to do, as a Muslims, more social experiments to be streamed live, either to YouTube or Facebook or whatever. And this is to show people around the world that because they don't know, they would do such things. And for us as an academia, then it is an obligation, not theological obligation, but it is just expected to academia to share knowledge as much as possible to the public. Yeah. Well, there are Muslims who are, quote, in quote, naughty as other religious others as well. Yeah, but that with the good understanding of religions, that would not or will not represent what the religion says or represent. Yeah, and for the social experiment, yeah, that's I believe it's very powerful to send message to the people around the world. Yeah, with the social experiments, we told them, or we show them the context of a particular case, and people who are watching the video, for example, lively, will see that that's because simply they don't know it, and then what we understand as Islamophobia always taking place. For the second question, quite theological as well. How do we do with the overloading information for Muslims, if I don't understand it mistakenly? Well, not necessarily as a Muslim, yeah, not necessarily a Muslim. If we have or receive information, then it depends to who receive the information and the way he examine the information, how it works in their brain to evaluate the information, and then he would decide what to do straight after that. For example, he would think this is good for me only, then I will not forward it to someone else. If it also beneficial to someone else, I might forward it to someone else too. That's after confirming that the news or the information is completely right. Yeah. So a lot of things to do, and that really shows who we are when treating new information coming to us. Thank you.
Thank you for both questions. Regarding the first question, thank you for sharing the experience. I remember being in the Rauda as well, and how difficult it was being with so many people at the same time who are different. And I think women in particular have a specific experience of the Hajj or the Umrah because of these layers of discrimination that they have. So first they have these regulations that they have to deal with, like taking the mahram with them, or having to go on the Rauda at a certain time and so on. And the pressure that creates for them, and also the differences between Muslim women themselves, because we all come from different cultures, we all come from different teachings, different upbringing, so we deal with people differently. And I think this is something to be embraced about Islam, that we are different, but not everyone appreciates it in the same way, unfortunately. And I think when it comes to bridging this gap, and the role of scholars and university scholars in particular, is for us to educate people who are going on Hajj on how to behave in front of others and how to represent ourselves as well. And I think that all Muslim countries, I think, have programs for teaching those going on Hajj how to do the rituals, for example, how to do the tawaf or what prayers to say. But what we need more is also how do we respect each other, for example, and how do we behave in front of all these Muslims. And to be honest, among Moroccans at least, the perfect pilgrims that they told me about when they talked about other pilgrims in Mecca were the Indonesians. So they always said that the Indonesians were very organized, they were very respectable, they didn't fight with anybody. So this is also very, very hopeful to see, and to see this as an example of the largest Muslim community in Mecca. But at the same time, people come from different backgrounds, and I think it's important to remember that we are different. And in your example, it's as a perfect case. Somebody was not very nice to you, but almost immediately somebody showed you passion and companionship. So, and this is what Islam is about. And that's why when we read Al-Fatiha or when we use it in our prayers, we say, Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim, because we pray to God to show us the right path. Because if it was easy to find the right path, we wouldn't be praying to God to show it to us. So I think Muslims try to go on the right path, but on our way to the right path, there are other ways that, because our lives are not only about religion, there are many other secular and non-religious aspects in our lives and concerns and so on. So it's important to remember that. For the second question about visiting ancestors, in Arabic we call it ziyara, and I think it's very contested among Muslims. If I'm talking in a theological perspective, it's not acceptable because in the hadith, لا تشد الرحال إلا لثلاثة مساجد. So Muslims should only go on a pilgrimage or to a religious travel to 3 mosques, the Grand Mosque of Mecca and the Prophet's Mosque in Medina and Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. So this is like the general kind of teaching, let's say, from the hadith. But in practice, a lot of Muslim societies have ziyarah. And like in Morocco, there are thousands of saint shrines that people visit. It is not to say that this is completely unacceptable, because people themselves know their conditions. And for many people, this is a substitute. As I said, not everyone can afford to go to Mecca, not physically, not financially, for example. So for many people to go on these minor pilgrimages is also very important. It's also important in the community level, and it also has a very important economic aspect, because many people, for example, do businesses there, and many people sell things, and people come from different areas. So there are also social interactions in these places. So I think they're still important to study and look at, and they're part of the local culture. So Islam is also not isolated from what existed alongside it or before it. Muslims have, or Islam in general as a practiced religion, has influences from so many other cultures and native or indigenous communities and their practices and so on. And so it's up to us in a way to either embrace them or fight them. And I think in a country like Indonesia, I personally see they're being embraced more than fought for. But I, like, better than me, I think, how the situation is. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Bu Hulut. Oke, saya due to the very limited time ya, saya tidak akan membuka sesi yang kedua. And I believe that semua jawaban dari 3 pembicara kita sudah terserap dengan baik, tidak perlu diinterpret lagi, Bapak dan Ibu. Ya, kemudian lagi satu hal yang saya mohonkan kepada Bapak dan Ibu partisipan, a very big applause for the 3 presenters today. It really marks our plenary session here. We have a very tight schedule. Jadi setelah ini nanti akan ada sesi makan siang dan kemudian zuhur, of course zuhur break. And thank you very much for Bapak Farid Fahrudin and Ibu Hulut Al-Azharma, and also Bapak Aryan Nakisa for being here, for sharing your ideas, dealing with anything you have already known. And then we have already reached and many accomplishment and many new light and new insights with your ideas. Okay, thank you. Dan sebelum saya akhiri, saya mengundang Bapak Ketua Panitia, Bapak Muhajir untuk beberapa informasi yang perlu ditambahkan terkait dengan sesi kita setelah ini. Silakan Bapak.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bapak Ibu sekalian, di jadwal kita setelah ini adalah jadwal untuk istirahat, sholat zuhur dan makan siang. Di belakang ruangan kita ada musola dan tempat wudhu. Kalau ada yang mau sholat dulu baru makan. Tapi kalau ada yang pengen ingat sholat ketika makan, bukan ingat makan ketika sholat, bisa langsung turun ke bawah ke lantai M1 menggunakan lift. Ada 2 lift di sebelah sana dan di belakang. Jadi lantainya tombolnya M1. Kemudian setelah selesai acara istirahat, kami jadwalkan pada jam 2 itu kita akan kembali ke ruangan ini, tetapi nanti ruangan ini disekat-sekat menjadi 3, sehingga kita akan mengadakan 3 acara secara bersamaan. Nanti masing-masing pembicara istilahnya kami arahkan ke setiap ruangan, dan desain dari acara di siang hari adalah bukan hanya pembicara menyampaikan materinya, tapi kami harapkan ada banyak dialog karena kita memberikan waktu 2 jam dari jam 2 sampai jam 4. Nanti diawali setiap pembicara masing-masing mungkin menyampaikan materi. Setelah itu kami harapkan akan terjadi banyak dialog di antara audiens dan pembicara. Masing-masing pembicara nanti akan ditemani oleh fasilitator, terutama yang muda-muda. Kami mengarahkan Bapak dan Ibu yang menjadi dosen metodologi untuk mengikuti kelas teaching methodology for undergraduates atau mengajar metodologi untuk mahasiswa S1, insya Allah nanti bersama Bapak Farid Sainong. Kemudian untuk mahasiswa baik S1 dan sampai S3 yang berhadir di sini, kami mengarahkan untuk mengikuti sesi dengan Bapak Aryana Kisa tentang social media dan sektarian konflik among Muslims. Lalu di tengah-tengah nanti ada bersama Ibu Khulud, Bapak dan Ibu dengan non pengajar metodologi atau bukan mahasiswa bisa ikut bersama sesi yang akan diisi oleh Ibu Khulud, yaitu tentang digital sources in pilgrimage and other rituals. Jadi berbicara mengenai bahan-bahan digital untuk mempelajari mengenai ziarah atau ritual-ritual yang lain. Tetapi kami sebagai panitia memahami jika Bapak dan Ibu lebih tertarik untuk mengikuti sesi yang lain, monggo saja dipilih. Yang penting kita punya acara, mudah-mudahan semuanya bisa berhadir. Dan sekali lagi desain dari acara setelah zuhur adalah mudah-mudahan lebih banyak interaksi ya, karena pembicara cuma 1, kita akan lebih banyak memberikan kesempatan lah kepada yang lain untuk berbicara. Saya kira itu pengumuman dari kami ucapkan terima kasih. Sekarang sudah jam 12:30, sudah zuhur belum ya? Belum ya? Belum. Mungkin kalau ada yang mau menunggu zuhur bisa di belakang, kalau ada yang langsung mau ke lantai M1 untuk menyantap makan siangnya juga dipersilahkan, lift di depan dan lift di belakang. Terima kasih, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Itu di custody room ya Bapak, ada ruang custody. M1 juga.